All right, we've done it. We've done it. Here we are. We've done it. Holy cow. I'm tired, guys. Monday evenings, man. Get to the end of capitalism. I won't lie to you. I had a couple too many drinks. I had a couple too many drinks last night. I had a nice night last night. But then the real kicker, oh man, the real kicker, the thing that really, really just like, and I'm mad about it. I'm mad about it. Uh, I got my dog back from my ex last night, which is great. I love my little guy, right? I love my little guy. He's the cuddliest. He's the sweetest. He's right here, cuddled up next to me right now. He's the sweetest little guy, and I love him. Uh, and I was woken up this morning because they were doing a test of the fire system, I think. So I stayed up late last night after a weekend of doing the capitalism, and the alarm went off in my building, woke me up, but more importantly, startle woke my dog up. And I don't know if any of you have a dog out there, but if your dog gets woken up in a startling sort of a fashion, that dog is awake. And that dog's not going to go back to sleep. And so my whole morning was me just like taking my dog down, dealing with my spooked, scared dog. Because as far as he's concerned, like I can rationalize it. I'm just like, oh yeah, the thing went off, right? Like and it woke me up, and that sucks, and that's horrible, whatever. But I can go back to bed right away, right? I'm just like, oh, I don't know, that's what's going on. All right, back to bed. The dog is like, the world is screaming at me. The world is screaming at me. I can't possibly, I've got to be alert and awake in case the world begins screaming at me again. So it took me a moment. Took me a moment to get my little guy, get Milo back down to sleep, but he was very restive and very like, or very you know what I'm talking, twitchy. Anyway, so here I am. I'm alive. Biscuits and gravy. Good to see you, Cotton. Good to see you, bud. Today is going to be a pretty slow chat, I think. It's going to be a pretty calm chat, which is exactly what I'm looking for today. No TikTok. Fuck these TikTok kids, right? We'll see if any of the previous crew come back in. We'll see. And I don't know. Today's going to be very like me and just sort of me doing what I always do, which is pontificate upon the nature of our capitalist system and wonder, why are we still going to work, do you think? I mean, obviously there's the survival aspect of it. Like obviously that's the case. But I continuously have like the same conversation over and over and over again. Everybody knows that the system is failing. Like everybody knows that the system is failing, and it's kind of like we've forgotten, like as a people, we've just forgotten that, oh, we can do stuff about that. Like we can do stuff about that. In France, they know exactly what to do, right? If the political class does anything to the populace, what happens? They're in the streets. They're in the streets. They understand that the way to prevent politicians from abusing the populace is to shut the country down. And to be so unabashedly. But we've got this really weird, like, worship of our suffering culture that I'm just really, really floored by. I really, really noticed it when I've gone back and I've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan stuff from maybe 2, 3 years ago. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to use a couple of clips in a little project that I'm doing. Uh, and in like with 2020 hindsight, it's so obvious that these guys are just dipshits. you know, like when you first listen to these guys and it's happening in real time, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I guess I see what they're saying. Oh sure, but then like time has moved forward, and things, especially Jordan Peterson, who is just like the dipshittiest of the dipshits, and then you go back and listen to his stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, like this is a very convenient ideology and a convenient position for capitalists to take. That the way to find meaning is to work hard for the quote unquote hierarchy, which is what Peterson says instead of owners, right? That's where meaning is. That you need to work really hard for the ownership class and make as much money as possible for the ownership class. And that's where meaning will come. You gotta take responsibility for yourself, and you gotta take on more responsibility, and it's through the process of taking on that responsibility that you'll find more meaning and become a stronger person. It's a very convenient ideology for owners. And I'm finding more and more that like so much of the capitalist ideology is just convenient. Like it's all very convenient. That like, I need a JP puppet, yeah. Like I was thinking a lot. The last show there was that fellow Tuco who was here, and we were talking and having disagreements. Right? He had a very far right economic sort of perspective, and really like I just came to realize like the idea, like capitalists will say this all the time, that like no, people are naturally selfish and will naturally hurt one another, right? And I just have come to see that like, oh, that's a very convenient position for the ownership class, right? Oh well, it's just natural that people will destroy one another. People are naturally selfish, so I'll just take advantage of people because they're going to take advantage of me anyway, right? It's a very convenient position for people who have power to take, right? Like it's what a great ideology for a serial killer. Right? Well, they're going to kill me first anyway, so I just killed them first. Right? Seraphim, absolute pleasure to see you. And Radio, good to see you too. This one's going to be a quiet one, I think, guys. This one's going to be a quiet one. And I think I just got to start saying that more often. Like, I need to stop engaging these guys on these moral arguments because, like, they don't actually have a position, right? It's just very convenient that, like, yes, I would like to dominate, control, and own people, and I can justify that because they would dominate me back, and that's just human nature, you know? Like trying to convince me that going to the circus and seeing a grizzly bear juggling means that it's in the nature of grizzly bears to juggle, you know? Certainly has nothing to do with like the exploitation and the training and the structure that they find themselves in. Content says, what is weird about meaning in the Peterson sense is that this meaning is born from comparison to others instead of a shared common goal. I'm not suffering as bad as the other guy, and I suffered too. Yeah, and I just think that, like, from what I've been listening of Peterson to in retrospect is that, like, all you have to do in order to buy in to the Petersonian stuff was just accept that the hierarchy, if you like, or the structure, the capitalist structure, is innate and natural. Like if you can just put that false ideology into your thinking as if it is just factually true, then everything Peterson says makes sense. And I think that is why he's so popular and why he's become popular. Because, like, not everything the guy says is bad or wrong, right? And it makes a lot of sense to people that, like, yeah, buck up, work harder. It's like The Secret for white men, right? Like, that's really what it is. It's just believe in yourself, manifest your destiny, right? Yeah, life is difficult and hard, and people encounter hardship and all of that. And just never, ever, ever take a meta perspective and look at the structure of the society in a meaningful way. And if you do, then just very quickly conclude that, well, it's all natural anyway because lobsters and stuff, right? Like just, this is the natural structure of things. It's inalterable. And the attempt to alter it would be a disaster because you're messing with something that's innate and natural inside of the human species. it's like as false an ideology and false an idea as any that's ever existed. It's falsifiable instantaneously and easily, like most of what Peterson says. But if you buy into that idea, then you can just go along with him. You can become a Peterson bro, and you can go to the seminars, and you can do all that kind of stuff. So, and conveniently, it lets you just completely ignore Marxism entirely, right? Just, oh, capitalism is an innate, natural human system that is generated from the human consciousness that can't be altered. And here's this guy who is actually observing and making arguments about the structure of capitalism and how it should be overthrown and changed. And so he can be ignored because we all know that capitalism is innate and normal and natural, right? And what's so hysterical to me about this ideology is that the very people who are saying this will also clutch onto a Bible like that tells them, give your money to the poor. Like, if I were to ask a guy like Peterson one question, like if I was to go to one of his speeches or lectures or whatever, I literally would just be like, so Jesus says give your money to the poor. What do you think about that? And I'd be very curious to see what he would have to say, because it's the immediate, like, well, okay, if selfishness and capitalism and all these sorts of things are innate human structures that are unavoidable, then why does your Christ seem to think that they're bad? Like, why should we ignore what's being said by the very people you worship? Like, literally worship. No one seems to come from the other side of that suffering and ask if the suffering was ever necessary to begin with. Yeah, the necessity of all of it, right? Like, and in Western society, and it's becoming very obvious that this is the case, there's literally no one, like literally no one, not the president, not Congress, not the Supreme Court, not the billionaire class, the bankers, no one, whose job it is to actually look at the society in a meta sense and make any plan whatsoever. That the planning that occurs in this society is done exclusively on the individual level and exclusively for the interest of those individuals. So, like, someone like the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem of the Bank of Canada, right? Sure, he's putting forth some kind of a plan, but that plan is only for his own interest and the interests of his owners, right? It's not in the interest of building a society. And that's something that I think we're going to pay for very, very dearly in this culture and this society, that we don't have anybody whose role is to make a larger systemic analysis of the society in any kind of meaningful way, attempting to be honest or truthful about what is happening in the society. Like, what's become embarrassing about these anti-capitalist types is that they simply cannot admit. They refuse to engage. And at this point, it is outright a refusal. They refuse to engage in the reality that there are owners and there are owned. That, like, step one of the Communist Manifesto, step one of this process of understanding what communism or Marxism is understanding that there are owners and owned. And the capitalist class simply refuses to even acknowledge that this dynamic exists in a serious or real way, right? They'll say things like, well, we're all in this together, and we're all pursuing the same thing, and I pay people a wage for their labor, and that's a legitimate exchange, and this is how you end up with a ridiculous libertarian right that's saying that capitalism is voluntary. Like, it's as childish a thing as I've ever heard in my life. That you have a labor pool of people who don't have food and shelter, and those are necessities that are withheld. Like, they're not voluntarily selling their labor. They're selling their labor so they don't starve in the streets. And it's extremely obvious. Like, as obvious as pointing to the emperor with no clothes and saying the emperor has no clothes. And yet we're all supposed to continue participating and going along in this system that's obviously designed this way. Like, it's so blatant and directly in front of your face. And you really can tell when someone has never actually been betrayed, or if they've seen someone be betrayed by the system of capital. They'll just be like, oh, well, what are you going to do? Right? This is the natural system. This is just how it is. And it's like that classic poem, right? Like, they came for this group and I said nothing because I wasn't in that group. And then finally they came for me and there was no one left, right? That kind of classic thing that gets misused by far-right sycophants all the time. But it's absolutely the truth. Oh, it didn't happen to me, so it doesn't matter, right? And it's only when it starts happening to me that it actually is an issue and it actually does matter. And you see that line of thinking in almost every conversation. The abortion conversation is really case in point, right? You see that all the time, constantly. That when it's someone else doing it, it's because they're a degenerate sinner who needs to repent and we have to stop everything. But if it's happening to me, well, my case is special, right? My case is special. And if we don't actually begin to take more seriously the idea that we probably should have people whose job it is to actually look at the society, be honest about what is happening in the society, and then make a plan in order to create a more stable, egalitarian environment, well, then it's going to collapse. And that's basically what I expect to see. I expect to see pretty significant collapses soon. Right? Pretty significant collapses soon. And I think the response from the ruling class is going to be to try to normalize it. That they're clearly trying to normalize this quote-unquote new economy that we're in, or whatever they want to call it now, right? The Great Reset or whatever it is they're going to call it. They want to make it so it's like, yeah, it's normal for all people to be working and barely paying their rent, right? Like, that's normal. That's just a normal society. We all have to get used to that. I saw one of the great apologist simps for the destruction of the civil society is Chrystia Freeland, right? The Nazi sympathizer and Nazi collaborator Chrystia Freeland, who literally stands in front of people and says, like, yes, we've experienced a decline in living standards, but it's because other nations are lifting out of poverty, and so there's an exchange, and so if we want to be good moral people, we have to accept this. Forgetting, of course, that, like, the reason why that dynamic happens is because our ruling class has pilfered the wealth, whereas the ruling class of the people who actually have experienced an increase in living standards have not, right? And we have deindustrialized ourselves and handed the industrialization, the tools, the means of production, and the tools for that production to other countries. And so And so they're trying to frame this like, oh, this decline happened because we gave and helped other people, and we good people need to accept that, which is completely ignoring the gigantic pile of wealth that's sitting off in the corner underneath people like Galen Weston and David Thompson, right? Good to see you. Good to see you, bud. Good to see you grinning. The obsession with suffering is probably from a Christian point of view. The devil is God's tool for purifying the saints. Essentially, the beatings will continue until morale improves. Yeah, the beatings will continue until morale improves. What a like that phrase is so perfect. It's so perfect for describing kind of how capitalism works. That the suffering you're experiencing is for your own good. It's so condescending and patronizing. This idea that it's fine for us owner-rich people to make you suffer because that will build character for you, and that's how you find your meaning, right? It's just so overtly, overwhelmingly condescending. Yeah, 1 Timothy 1:20, among them are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I've handed over to Satan to be taught not to blaspheme. Yeah, it's all quite evil. Yeah. I mean, it's... The Bible is a fascinating literary document to read from the perspective of, like, yeah, this is what was going on in the Roman Empire, right? Like, once you understand that, they're like, oh, here's a literary document that's connected to the historical documents of the time, right? Like the old Greek gods and the Roman gods and the stories of Dionysus and Ra and all this kind of stuff, right? And once you understand its place in the lineage of storytelling and the lineage of the history of humanity. It's a phenomenal document. Like, it really is. It's a phenomenal document. And once you understand like what these things are, like Timothy is a letter, right? Like it's not a narrative. It's literally like a letter that gets written to one of the churches, and the and it's fascinating to see what these people were saying to each other and what they were trying to, like, we get really hyper focused on this idea that like the every single word of this is a dictate from God himself to tell us how to live our lives and all this, and it's like, nah, not really. Like, Timothy is written by I think it is probably Paul. I forget who wrote Timothy, but it's just a letter, and it's essentially like chicken soup for the soul. It's essentially like, I'm gonna try to, like a literate citizen of the Roman Empire who has been educated and who has a larger meta perspective and who has literally had a come to Jesus moment on the road to Damascus, am going to attempt to bolster the faith and bolster the resolve of an organization that's attempting to structure and organize itself against a literal empire, right? Like, what the early churches and what the early Christians were doing is literally building like communes and organizations that worked against the interests of the empire. That's why the empire went after the Christians for so long, is because the empire completely understood that, oh, if this idea that Christianity is spreading around, give money to the poor, right? More egalitarian structures. We should all have an equality of validity with one another. People's food and shelter should be taken care of. We should live in a society that's not based on overt oppression and violence from a ruling class that dominates us. And we should live together in peace and harmony with one another. Like, if that idea were to take hold, it would be the destruction of the Roman Empire. And I've heard it argued that the reason why a reason why the Roman Empire goes into a decline is because of ideologies, not exclusively Christianity, because Christianity wasn't the only one doing this, but that Christianity was going around saying, hey, stop being a violent dickhead, give your money to the poor. And so what's going to happen, right? Less people are going to join the military. And the entire Roman Empire is built on the concept of, let's take our military force, go to the north, get slaves, bring them back, right? Enslave populaces, bring them into Rome, have these people be the labor pool and actually facilitate and do everything. It's very much like what we're doing today, that we're going to be using climate change as an incentive to for peoples to migrate here, and those peoples will become the new underclass, right? A slave class, right? We got an article today from Politics Today. By 2050, food insecurity might affect 3.5 billion individuals. Like, you're looking at a really disastrous outcome that is going to have 3.5 billion people literally migrating, like 1 billion people migrating. Like, this is like yeah, it's beyond biblical. Like, it's beyond biblical. Like, it's should there be human survivors, they'll look back on this period of time with disbelief, right? Like the way that we look back at the Noah's Ark narrative. The Noah's Ark narrative, to us, we're like, this didn't happen, right? Like, we don't actually believe that the Noah's Ark narrative happened the way that it's said, that the entire earth was flooded and there was this boat and there were the two of every animal and so on and so forth, and onward it goes, right? The story. Good to see you, by the way, looking dizzy. I didn't have the chance to say hi. And and so we don't really believe it, right? But we probably believe that there's some kind of grain of truth to it, right? The story of a flood is so ubiquitous throughout all narrative storytelling that it's difficult to believe there wasn't some kind of event that occurred, right? We just don't exactly understand how it worked or any of that kind of stuff, but we understand the mythology of it. And I think that this, where you're going to have 1 billion people migrating and climate change and the change of the ocean tides and shit like this that's coming, in like 100 years after that, people are just going to be like, there's no way this happened this way. Like, there's no way this actually happened this way. And we're going to do documentaries, and there's going to be big stories about it. And just like, I think there's just going to be kind of this head-scratching, like, how in the goddamn fuck did this happen? And when they see how it actually happened, I think they're just going to be gobsmacked. They're literally going to be like, so you're telling me that a small handful of psychopaths, just like rapacious, overt psychopaths, took over the society, burnt a bunch of fossil fuels and coal and oil, while convincing the vast majority of the society that this was an important thing to do. And by doing this, they destroyed the planet. And the answer is like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. That we the gullible masses are caught in this like, got big truck means I'm big and good. I got a big truck and I'm the best. I'm good. And Jordan Peterson says that if you work real hard and sacrifice, then you're a good person. And I'm a good person. I got a big truck to prove it. Fuck Trudeau, right? Like some of the best-selling vehicles today. Some of the best-selling vehicles right now today are trucks that are bigger than World War II tanks. Like, that's how fucking stupid we are. That and the people that are making these things will just say, well, we're just trying to fill a demand. You know, people have a demand, and so we're just trying to fill it. Forgetting, of course, that, like, yeah, they're trying to fill a demand that you're creating by flooding the society with your propaganda shit, advertising. You want to be a man, you want to have a Ford F-150 8349 Thunder Cougar Alpha Bird, and if you don't have this, then you're a pussy. Drive a Ford. Like, and I just think that, like, future generations are just going to be absolutely gobsmacked by it. They're going to look at it and be like, holy fucking shit. Like, we are so fucking stupid. Because it doesn't need to happen. It literally doesn't need to happen. Like, we could just stop it. Like, we could just stop it. Like, maybe don't have a war with China. How about that? Maybe don't have a war with Russia. Maybe, crazy thought, weird thought, strange and odd, maybe everybody driving around to places they hate in order to do jobs that are pointless is stupid and dumb, and we should stop it. Like, we should just stop it. But the free market will decide. And if the free market says that everybody needs to burn more fossil fuel in order to get the jobs they don't like, that actually don't do anything important, then that's what the market's deciding. The Roman military-industrial complex developed due to their world war with Carthage. Interesting how that works. Yeah, exactly. That seems to be how the West is, man. Like, we love war. We love it. We just can't seem to stop. We're literally just like, if we're not fighting a war out with a foreign power, we got to fight a war with ourselves. And I just think that, like, there is something wrong with Westerners, and I think it's thousands of years old, and I think it really is built into the DNA that the strange and odd and peculiar position from the Westerners' perspective is don't fight. That's the strange position if you're a Westerner. And if you stand up and say maybe don't fight, then you're the odd one out. And if you're standing up saying, hey, how about we have basic, like kindergarten level, Sesame Street level sharing and compassion for one another in the society, then you're just ruthlessly mocked. And I think that's like the major advancement that the West has done is that we stopped crucifying people. And that's it. That's probably the most major advancement the West has ever achieved, right? Everything else is just kind of weird little technology, right? But the major social advancement is, well, we used to nail people to boards and we don't do that anymore. Not in public, at least. So, we're doing it. It only took us 2,000 years. Compton says, I think Florida has made it crystal clear that wokeness means, what wokeness means is anything non-hetero white. Yeah. No, dude, all you got to do is listen to DeSantis' speeches, and every time he says the word woke, replace it with the word black. And you're set. Right? Like, it's the same. And all you got to do is take the footage and put it in a black and white kind of grainy sort of look, and you're back in the 1950s, right? Like you're right there with like the Nixon Republicans. You're right there with the kind of old guard of like the Ku Klux Klan and all this kind of shit, right? Like the society hasn't actually advanced very far, and it looks as though we are going to experience a backlash from this quote-unquote, what's being called quote-unquote woke. If you ask me, I think the worst thing, the people who are truly to blame for the backlash that's coming and for the ridiculousness that's coming are actually corporations like Disney, who have cynically used these ideas of egalitarianism, these ideas of acceptance and inclusion, as a way to sell a product, because controversy sells, right? So if you create the most controversial product possible, it stirs up a lot of conversation. A lot of people watch it, right? Because everybody has this kind of like, oh my God, I cannot believe that they are doing this, right? Case in point is this show Velma that's come up, right? Like this keeps coming up on my feed. I'm not going to watch this thing because it's obviously drag. It's the most cynical, like these are the new like blaxploitation films. Like these are the new, like we're gonna take people's desire to live in egalitarian systems, to look at other races and minorities, and want to live in a kind of equality or a peaceful way with them, and then we're gonna try to monetize these things, right? They're going to try to monetize them. And this monetization means that you present the absolute worst version of these people. And that's essentially what Velma has become. And and then it's extra controversial, and it really piles on, because what they're doing is they're taking an older intellectual property, something we all grew up with, and then bastardizing it, right? Fundamentally altering it in a way that makes it incoherent to its original thing, and to me that's very offensive, because it's not building on the thing and being honest to the characters as they are. It's literally exploiting the names and the aesthetic value while completely destroying the internal core of what these characters actually were or represent. Seraphim says some archaeological experts think the flood comes after the end of the Ice Age, when glacial rivers were released into the plains. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? That makes sense. Like, was there a boat with two animals and all that kind of stuff? Probably not. And, like, did it actually, like, flood the entire world, or was it, like, stories that come out of, low-lying ground and all this? Clearly there was a major flood. Like, I don't. If somebody were to stand in front of me and say that there probably wasn't a flood, I'd be like, everybody says so though. Like all these cultures across all of these places are just like, yeah, there was a big flood, and each of them made like an interesting story, right, about the flood. And so I think that I think it's more likely that there was a flood than there wasn't a flood. But what Christians like to do is say, this is how it happened. That a man had a boat with animals, and that's the way it went down. And he's the one who did the thing. And I'm like, probably one story of many, right? Like, this is a very small, isolated kind of thing. And, like, I bet you that story came out as a way to discuss the flood and a way to discuss larger concepts of, like, why did it occur, and the concept of man's helplessness in the face of a large natural force and these sorts of things. Like, in many of the old biblical stories are not actually that much different in their intention or their power than the Godzilla narrative, right? Big giant lizard shows up, blows your town up. There's nothing you can do about it. Like the sense of helplessness, the sense of just like, what do we even do in this overwhelming kind of force of nature that comes through, and like, what are we? How are we supposed to move on? How do we pick up after such a disaster? And I think that probably the people who experienced that flood felt very much that way. That just like, oh yeah, we got fucking ramrodded. Hey, Command Genius. Hey, Adam, Broccoli. Good to see you guys. I don't mean to ignore you guys. I'm just, you know how it goes, man. I'm very tired. I'm very, very tired. That's how I'm doing. Adam, not trying to be nitpicky. Adam McPherson being nitpicky? That doesn't sound like the Adam McPherson I know. I'm just fucking with you, dude. But friends from Central and South America really resent the term Western, as they are either ignored or incorrectly bundled with Canada, US, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Oh, interesting. When I say the term Westerner, I'm saying it. Yeah, I don't include Latin America in that. I don't. Latin America is not Western. Its history is not the Western history. Well, that's not exactly true, but definitely like when I say the word Western, I really am talking about like the Roman Empire, Europe, like that lineage, right, of the Roman Empire, and then the history of Europe, and then the history of colonization. So basically, America, Canada, Australia, and Europe is what I mean when I'm saying Westerner, and I don't really include South America, Central and South America in that at all, because I think that they have it's the history of colonization that occurred throughout South America is somewhat similar. Honestly, it's incredible what happened in South America, man. Like like what happened in North America was certainly a genocide, and it was certainly white people moving in and like taking over. But what happened in South America was even more explicit. Like even more explicit. The Spanish went in there basically saying, "Yeah, we're here to fuck you up," and we did. Like they just fucking cleansed the place. And so much of the architecture and so much of the structures, like we know from the literature, that so many of these structures were actually like laden with gold. That and so much of it got ripped apart and ripped down and then melted into coins. Like the barbarism of the Spaniards throughout South America is just absolutely incredible and persists to this day for sure. In their structures, it's pretty incredible. But you are raising an interesting point. Like I don't really know how to. Like I don't know what to say then. Like I don't know what term to use. I don't know what to say. Like you're European, but Spain is in Europe. Like, but definitely like South America's journey, especially because like. South America never became part of the internal core. It's always been colonized, and it's always been like the America has always treated it like a vassal state to be colonized and exploited. That there isn't this idea that South America is somehow part of the decision-making process. That as far as the owners of the society are concerned, South America is only a concern to us because there are resources for us to exploit. That if it wasn't for the resources there, we literally would not even, like, we would pay no attention to it at all. The map would literally be America with like a little tiny dongle on the bottom, and we'd be like, yeah, South America's down there, I guess. And that's as far as anybody would, yeah. Insert Parenti quote here, Danarchist. Exactly right. That the global South is not blah de blah, but overexploited. What is it? Underdeveloped. That the global South is not underdeveloped. It's overexploited. That's probably one of Michael Parenti's greatest quotes. I it's a real shame what happened with Michael Parenti, man. But I'm glad that he existed, and I'm glad that I found him. Anyway, yeah. So to address your point, Adam, I just don't know. May I recommend calling Western society white? What? Oh, white society, or Euro society, or something else other than Western. Yeah, yeah. The reason why I don't say white society is because I'm trying really hard to not get into that whole race conversation. And I know that if I start saying white society, and I have said that in the past, but I just worry that suddenly I'm setting myself up to get into this huge conversation that I actually don't care that much about. You know? Even though we are in a white supremacist society for sure. Like, that's absolutely the truth. And European society doesn't quite work out because the history of Latin America, like, Spain is a European country, and the history of Latin America is the history of Spanish colonization. And so, that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Maybe I will just start saying white society, though, because, like, that is the truth. Right? Like, it is the truth. Although I tend to agree with a lot of the critical race theory people who talk about race as a construct, that whiteness didn't really exist as a concept until it became useful for the colonizers to be able to organize along those lines. That, oh, well, you, like, for a long period of time, like, different groups of white people disparaged one another. like the Scottish and the Irish were considered subhuman by the British for forever, right? And you can see the signs all across Canada and America. No Irish, right? No blacks, no Irish. And so this concept of race really only comes up because I think wealthy white people, because the wealthy class is a white class, needed to create allegiances amongst and create divisions where none existed previously. The previous divides were almost exclusively based on class. And so they needed to find ways to get the white people who are in the underclass on side. And a great way to do that is to be like, oh, well, you're white now, right? So you're we're allies because we're white. It's a complete construct. And one that, like, my favorite commentator on it is actually Bill Nye, who is literally like, why are we even having a discussion about melatonin levels that are based almost entirely on your geographical location? That, like, people who are born in this region have more melatonin and people who have less have this much melatonin. And it's like, really, here's the graph. Like, why are we even talking about it? It's so babyish to even bring up. So that's another big reason why I don't really like talking about that, because it seems to me like the whole thing is just another made up bullshit thing that we do, right? It's just another, just like, oh, well, we're white so we're allies and you're not white and so you're, it's just so fucking stupid. But I understand what you're saying. Like, if I was from Central and South America, I wouldn't really want to be lumped in with these fucking psychos. Grinning, I heard recently that Walt Disney World would replace Benjamin Franklin on the U.S. $100 bill. Might have been a meme. Yeah, I saw that too. I looked into it. Not real. If that happened, though, I would basically be like, yeah, the corporate coup d'etat is complete. Like, that, and they're rubbing our nose in it. Like, can you imagine if, like, Elon Musk or Bezos or Gates or any of these guys ended up on our money? Like, they're rubbing their dicks in our face and telling us work harder. Like, that's exactly what that would be. And I can't imagine. I've said it several times before on this podcast, and I think it's absolutely the truth, that the previous ruling class, the previous class of capitalist owners, were smarter because they understood and understand, and there are some of them still exist. They understand that the best position is to just not be in the news. Just nope, nobody knows about us, right? We're behind the shadows, right? Nobody brings us up. We're not involved in the conversation, right? We own huge tracts of land, shares, billions of dollars, all of this kind of stuff. Like we own people, we are slaveholders, but nobody knows who we are, right? Like you exist in a more mysterious kind of capacity, and if people do need to talk about talk about you, then it's in a very like circuitous way or a sideways way or through a surrogate usually. Like that's essentially the political class, is that these are surrogates for the wealthy. It's only this modern class of billionaires who are so stupid and ridiculous, because they're new money would be the way to describe them, that they need everybody to know who they are, and they've got to be like, I'm the God King Elon Musk, and I'm Jeff Bezos shooting rockets at space, and look how awesome I am, right? And like, if I can't imagine a stupider person to basically just like, yeah, put me on money. That's a good idea. Then every time anyone looks at this money that they need to eat, they know who owns them. Yeah, great idea. Have you ever considered how horrible it would be to put effort into being what is considered white? I would be deeply unhappy. Yeah, dude, like, what a pain in the ass. What a pain in the ass it is. It's such a pain in the ass that, like, I could do without it. Like, I could do without it. It would be super great if, like, when I interacted with a black person or a person of color of any sort, that we would just be like, here we are, two people talking to one another. But there is always this kind of dangling, like, lineage of, like, well, I am white and you are black, and then there's the Martin Luther King and all this. Like, it's annoying at the highest possible level. But that's our whole fucking culture. Our whole culture is just fucking annoying. Like, if it wasn't so devastatingly horrible, like if it wasn't so murderous and psychopathic, it would be just like a joke. It'd be like, it's like a fucking Rick and Morty parody planet. Broccoli says, war isn't in people's DNA, it's the system of capital and other class societies. Yeah, I know that, Broccoli. It just seems that way. You know? It just seems that way. That war is always for the benefit of the ruling class. And we are just constantly paying for this idea that a small group of people should own everything. Right? And it's the small folk who are paying for it. Latin America is usually included in the Global South. Yeah. The Global South is not poor. You don't go to poor countries to make money. Yeah. The synonym for Western powers is Atlanticist imperialism. Oh yeah, okay. It's just like those crazy white folk. Race science only came about in the 19th century, yeah. I'm not really white, kind of pink, actually. It depends on how dark my freckles get in the winter. Yeah, but, like, we wouldn't call ourselves pink folk. We wouldn't do that. That's not how European people would have been. They wouldn't have been like, yeah, we are the superior race. The superior pink race. Right? Everybody's wearing, like, rose-colored... the Ku Klux Klan isn't, like, white. It's, like, rose-colored, right? Yeah, no, dude. I don't know if Rick and Morty is officially canceled, but it's because it's such a cash cow. Like, it's such a huge cultural thing. I'd be very surprised if it was I shouldn't say very surprised if it was canceled, but question marks. Remember when the big scandals that came through were like Bill Clinton having an illicit affair with an intern and everybody being like, that's inappropriate. A full-grown woman who's in his employ, that seems... Now, why is everyone a pedophile all of a fucking sudden? Why is it that every scandal that comes out now is like, yes, I was raping children. Sure, I'm grooming girls, right? Like, I really long for the days where it's just like the kind of like normal, like, like a domestic violence scandal, like Ray Rice hitting his wife or something, Mike Tyson hitting his wife, right? Like these sort of domestic disputes. Now everybody's a pedophile. What the fuck? Like what the fuck? Karl Marx didn't write about this. There's no chapter in there. It's like capitalist descent into pedophilia. Edward Allen, good to see you. Zan Drake Garcia. There's a fun name to say, dude. Zan Drake Garcia. Is that your actual name, dude? Because if so, congratulations to your parents. What a beautiful name. Yeah, pink people better for real. Yeah, exactly. I just am imagining like the Ku Klux Klan wearing like light rose colored uniforms, right? Pink power. It's got the alliteration. Yeah, real great. I think you mean melanin, if it were not melatonin. Oh, yeah, you're right, Radio Halifax. You're right. My bad. Melanin, that's correct. I'm a human being who sees other human beings and cares for other human beings. The only exception to this rule is fascists. The only good fascist is a dead fascist. Yeah, fascists aren't human. Like, straight up. Like, I don't fuck around with that. If you're literally going to stand up and say we should exterminate groups of people, then we don't need to tolerate that. We don't need to pretend like it's like, if you fight back against people who want to exterminate minority groups, then you're the real Nazi. Shut up. Like that's baby brain stupid bullshit. And if you're actually saying that out loud, then you're probably just a Nazi trying to pretend as though I should be allowed to say what I like. It's free speech. We should round up the Jews. Like, get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, pink culture has problems. Exactly. Groomer is code for bigots to use against LGBTQ community. It's a way to call them pedophiles without actually calling them pedophiles. It also replaces other unacceptable insults. Yeah, there's a lot of that doublespeak going on these days, isn't there? Like that's what they're doing with woke, right? Woke is the big one now. That like they can't say black, right? They can't say that black culture is taking over and we gotta do something to fight back against this black culture, right? They've gotta, so they say woke, right? It's the same shit though. Like if you listen to like the people who were fighting against Martin Luther King, right? When they were saying things that were very explicit in that regard, right? It's the same rhetoric. It's the exact same rhetoric. They just say woke instead of black. Like so, it's just the history of slavery maintaining itself in the society and reasserting itself. That we have had a period of time, that period, I think, like we had a period of time in the 60s, and that's reverberated into the modern era. Like the Martin Luther King civil rights movement and that whole era has reverberated into the culture, but it's widely been co-opted by like Disney, who uses it as a way to cynically make money for itself. Like that's really what it's doing. And the blowback from it is going to be very severe. Very, very severe. Like, the example that I keep giving, I'm very confident that we are going to see like a Homelander from The Boys type figure. Like when we watch The Boys, Homelander is a villain. And we all know that, right? Everybody looks at Homelander and goes, okay, there's the villain of the piece, right? But we're going to see a piece of media come out that presents Homelander, and he's going to be exactly the same character, right? Except instead he's going to be the protagonist. And he's going to be the guy that we're going to be rooting for. And I think you saw the proto version of that in The Rock playing Black Adam. That Black Adam was sort of the first iteration of the proto version, the prototype of this idea of let's do a superhero movie, but the protagonist is actually literally a Nazi. And let's have people watch this and really root for someone who is essentially a Nazi. And that we will have a franchise. They're going to try to make a franchise of like a Superman style, a Homelander figure, who we're all supposed to go watch his stuff and be like, yeah, this guy's the best, Homelander, yeah, I really love this guy, woo, and he's basically going to be a Nazi. And nobody's going to really, like, it's going to be really obvious, it's going to be really in your face, it's going to be really overt. Like, the iconography will be there, the same kind of saluting, like all of that kind of stuff, the cult of personality, all of it. And the merchandise will all be there. Like, everything will be there to make it as obvious as possible. And we're not very far away from it, right? Like, the Marvel movies were very, very close to essential, like, Tony Stark is an arms dealer, for Christ's sakes. Like, they're all like they are neoliberal, but neoliberal's not that far off of fascism. It just needs to take the pivot, in the natural pivot, from we're doing this for the good of everyone into we're doing this for the superiority of the most powerful people in the society, who just happen to be white. Oh goodness, right? And they'll find a way to bring white power back into the conversation, just like they use woke as a pejorative against people of color. They'll find a way to say white power with some kind of phrase or some kind of thing as a dog whistle that will not be like like very silent. It'll just be like a regular whistle. It won't even be a dog whistle. Yeah, the commodification of everything damages human culture, promoting aberrations of all kinds. Yeah, I think that's right. And the commodification of our society is, I think it's completely devastating. It's been devastating to basic human relations. That, like, if you, like, really think about how perverse it is that we live in a society now where, like, conservative voices are actually saying, like, you got to get your money up, right? Get your money up. That's how you're gonna have more sex and get with women and all this kind of stuff. Get your money up, right? So commodify yourself, become a commodity, and then the relationships that you have are all based on this idea of, you know, quote unquote, being a provider. As if we're still like hunters and gatherers living in like small communities of tribesmen, right? Instead of living in a highly sophisticated technocratic society, right? Where no, everyone's like, the idea of being a provider in this society seems like barbaric as barbaric can be. Like, what are you talking about being a provider? Like, we literally have the resources. Like, we've got all of the resources. Right? The question shouldn't be, are you a provider? The question should be, are you a decent person? Right? Do you treat people like shit? Are you trying to put people down to elevate yourself? Are you a fucking psychopath? But instead of that, we're essentially openly discussing a reversion back to barbarism. Like that, and it's stated as if it's just like this normal, yeah, you got to be a provider, right? What are you even fucking talking about? And yeah, everything's commodified, like in a bullshit, annoying way. Even what we're doing here, I'm forced to commodify, right? What do I say? Like, share, subscribe. Please consider donating to the Patreon, right? All of that kind of stuff that I don't say enough, honestly. Anytime I discuss the financial success of what I'm trying to do, the number one thing anyone will tell me is, how often are you actually saying that? It's like, I hate doing it. I despise it because it is commodifying what I am doing. But I'm forced to do that because I have to eat, right? It's as simple as that. I have to eat. And doing stuff like this even is only deemed successful by people if it's financially viable, right? So if I get into a position where I'm like, let's say I'm in the same kind of position as someone like Hassan, right? Where I'm making my money off of doing this and I don't work another job, that this is what I do, right? Then suddenly everyone will be like, oh, goodness me. well then, and I'll be treated like I have validity. But if I want to just do this to do this because I think it's a service that helps people, myself included, get through this fucking ridiculous capitalist bullshit, then oh well, you're just some asshole, right? And the same guys that are walking around talking about like the we should judge each other based on the quality of our character, right? Misusing or appropriating Martin Luther King's statements, right? But that's not. But nobody actually gives a shit about that. Like nobody actually cares about the quality of our characters, right? No. One thing I've really noticed, right, is COVID came along and blew everything up for everyone, and nobody seems to care about that. That if you got laid off or you got shit on or or you went through a breakup or you did all this kind of stuff, like no one gives a shit at all. No one cares at all. Like how much money are you making? That we've commodified even our most basic connections and conversations with one another. That we can't even really be friends if you're not making as much money as I am making, right? Just seems to be the way of it. Cotton says, sorry, what I meant by being white is actively practicing whatever these white Nazis say is white. Having to be straight, having to be monogamous, having to be Christian, having to be cis, but not just happening to be that, but actively making sure you conform to it. Yeah, there's a commitment, right? It's like, it's not enough that is what you are, right? Like, you gotta present it as if that's the moral core, that's the moral center. That if you are monogamous, Christian, cis, straight, and white, then you're a better person. And the more you adhere to those ideas, the better God or Jesus or whoever will look upon you, right? That your you will be smiled upon by your creator if you are white, straight, monogamous, Christian, and cis. And so anybody that stands up that aren't those things, well, that they're morally abhorrent, right? And I think you're absolutely right that the people who are standing up and saying and are pushing back against the quote-unquote woke culture, well, they're doing so because they think that it's better to be white and monogamous and all of these kind of things, instead of just accepting that, like, oh yeah, that's one position of many, right? Like, yeah, MFers be taking Homelander just like me for real, too seriously. Yeah, but no, man. You watch. It'll happen even within the confines of The Boys. That Homelander, like, all they would have to do is have one season where Homelander is becomes a sympathetic figure. Right? You see this happen where the villain becomes the hero, right? And I think that they could do it within the show of The Boys. I don't think that Grant Morrison would let that happen because I think Grant Morrison is a real storyteller. But I think it could happen, and I just think that, like, Nazis are going to create Homelander except good, right? That this is what we should be doing. I even see Superman as a villain to an extent. I mean, Superman has always been like the American God, right? Like, he's American Jesus basically, and he isn't a real person. Like, he's not a real, like, he is an archetypal figure just by his existence. And that's why Superman hasn't really successfully made the transition into this kind of dark, gritty reality. That's why Superman movies are not really that good, and because Superman's not a person. Like, Clark Kent isn't real. Like, Clark Kent is literally a manufactured image of an alien, of humanity. And Superman was just like, he's always been an icon. He's always been like the embodiment of virtue, right? And he's always been the projection of what America hoped to be or wanted the world to see them as. And in a way that like if you take a naive perspective, right, like which most Americans are actually very naive, he's extremely wholesome as a figure, right? That like this is what we want to be like, and this is who we want to be. We want an embodiment of truth and justice in the American way, right? That we're big and we're strong, but we're responsible and we do good, right? And all you have to do is ignore all of American history, right? And every moment of American history to believe that that's real. But there's something charming in a naive sort of way of the idea that here's an icon that we want to be. Yeah, Canadians too. You're right, dude. That we want to be like Superman, and that I don't hate that. Like I don't hate that. This idea of like I take a look at Star Trek, for example, and look at that and be like, yeah, this is what we want to be like, right? And I think Superman is also like that. That this is what we want to be like. But now we're in this like gritty, dark reality kind of place where like Batman is a person. And once you step Batman off of the pedestal of like the icon of what we want to be and put him in the place of no, this is what he actually is, you see very quickly how psychopathic that character actually is. And the culture hasn't really been willing to bite down on that bullet with Superman. Because if you were to actually have a Superman character that existed in the world for real, wouldn't be like fucking Clark Kent Superman, man. Like it'd be a whole different thing. Like a whole other bottle of wax. I think Alan Moore really understood that. Dr. Manhattan is exactly right. That I think the detachment that Alan Moore captured with like a superhero or a Superman type figure is precisely right. That he wouldn't be like this dominating, gonna crush you, I'm gonna own this place. He wouldn't be like Superman Red Sun, right? Like he wouldn't be like that. And he wouldn't be sticking around getting cats out of trees and shit and looking at humans with this like I'm here to protect you and all that kind of stuff. I think that ultimately a real Superman kind of a figure would just detach, right? That we would be so beneath such a person that like why does Superman even stick around? Like why even bother? Who gives a shit about this planet of gnats, this planet of like little apes and shit? Like who actually cares? Like why is Superman this great protect? He literally would leave, which is exactly what Dr. Manhattan does, because there's nothing here. We become tiresome. We become tiresome to such a figure. And I think Alan Moore really captured that and really understood it. And in a way that would be the true, like that would be what I think would break America's heart more. I think that America would prefer a Superman who became a dominating, destructive figure like a Homelander. We would prefer that than what I think would actually happen, because what would actually happen would really capture the kind of patheticness of the human existence in comparison. That as long as we're worthy of saving or worthy of destruction, then we're good. But if we are unworthy of either, and the figure just leaves because we're not worth its time, I think that would break everybody's heart. And I don't think they would be able to take that, right? Like, and that narrative it's so funny because that narrative is actually emerging in the alien conversation. Like, why won't aliens come and talk to us? It's like, well, have you looked around? Why would they? And that narrative, which I've talked about a lot, is I see that emerging elsewhere in the culture. That people are actually saying like, yeah, if there are aliens, they're not coming here. Like, there's no mystery here. Why would they? What possible reason could they have to even talk to us? I actually thought about this last night. Is that there's that theory, and I think it's like what Graham Hancock has this theory that like aliens visited like ancient peoples, right, and ancient civilizations, and there's the whole like aliens built the pyramid, that whole idea, and I just love the idea that aliens will happily visit like barbarians living in the desert, basically, right? Like they'll happily come down and be like, "Hey, humans, we're from space," because I think that like they would like we would immediately be like, "Oh shit, people from space! Oh my god, how are you guys doing? Oh my goodness." Right? And the aliens were like, "Oh cool, you guys are up on your feet and like building shit and all that kind of stuff. That's cool. Let's talk." Right? And the two of them would actually have like a pretty good time and a pretty good conversation. The aliens would come down and have a nice time. Right? It takes a highly advanced technological society like ours for the aliens to be like, "Nah, get the fuck out of here with this shit." Isn't that Positivism? I have no fucking idea, dude. I don't know that much about Positivism, so maybe you know more about it than I do, Command Genius. That's always completely possible. Basically what Andrew Tate said. Yeah, fucking Andrew Tate. I'm so fucking happy that what's happening to that guy is happening to that guy. It is just like magnificent. It's magnificent that, oh no, the consequences of my own actions. Like he's just getting completely ramrodded, and I'm here for it, man. I think it's so embarrassing that there are huge groups of people who are like, it's the power, it's the Illuminati type, it's the World Economic Forum going after Andrew Tate. I'm like, nah, dude, the guy's like a fucking rapist. Like it's really pretty clear. He cops to it in many times. So I'm happy to see that it's actually happening, and I think it's great that like it's becoming extremely obvious that the far right media organizations that exist in our culture are essentially like Nazi level or just thugs, basically. Like Andrew Tate goes on Tucker Carlson, gets arrested for sex trafficking. Kanye West goes on Tucker Carlson, says that Hitler's the greatest. Like, just they keep platforming these despicable people, and I'm like here for it. You know, I'm here for it. Yeah, neoliberalism collapses naturally into overt fascism. Yeah, because like eventually there comes a point where the principles of neoliberalism extract all the wealth upwards, and then the populace is like, hey, we should redistribute it, and so they're like, no, we're just going to beat the shit out of you. Like, that's all. Yeah, commodified in our free time. Our basic necessities are commodified, and soon it will be the air we breathe, because they can, poisoning the planet we live on to the point where there is no other alternative. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, why not try to commodify the air, right? Like, why not try to commodify the water? Like, why not try to commodify these things? Like, it's the reason why we don't have better electrical systems, because if we had electrical systems where electricity was just available for everybody, then capitalists couldn't make money off of it, right? He needs our yellow sun, I guess. Otherwise, he's just man. Dr. Manhattan is a very interesting take on superheroes. Yeah. No, I think Alan Moore generally, good to see you, by the way, Mr. Moon. Alan Moore generally is really, really worth the time to pay a lot of attention to. His perspective on most things is fairly accurate. And he's like his take on this entire Marvelization of the society, he's just like, yeah, like he essentially says what I say, which is that we're children. We're just children that refuse to grow up, that instead of actually taking a look at our problems and actually taking a look at the world and actually facing them in, we're retreating into a kind of like childish fantasy that like comic books were always supposed to be for kids. Like they were always supposed to be for kids. And this idea that like grown-ups are starting to have serious moral discussions and attempting to fill this sort of vacuum that exists in the culture because we have no moral leadership. There's almost no one worth listening to. The people who have sort of slotted into these positions of moral leaders are essentially frauds, right? and and it's become obvious that they're frauds. Uh, uh, and so when we've got this vacuum of moral conversation where no one can even agree what language or literature to use, because no one's using Christianity anymore, right? That's not considered a moral language that has much merit or is taken very seriously outside of its little kind of clique. And even within the clique, it's no one's literate. No one actually reads the goddamn thing. And when they do read it, they're like, there was a wizard that literally was around, right? And and so we're trying to find a way to have moral discussions and a way to discuss morality with one another. And we're groping for just the shit we all watched. That's why Harry Potter comes into the conversation all the time, right? Like, because we all watched it. And everybody knows the characters. And so you can attach sort of moral ideas and moral principles to this thing that we all saw and attempt to make moral arguments that fit within the confines of that story because we all participated in it. But it falls apart so quickly because you recognize very fast, if you actually start to think about the Harry Potter universe and the Harry Potter world, that these guys are basically fucking fascists. Like, the wizarding community basically is like an Illuminati type figure that dominates the world through secret channels and all this. Harry Potter is a fucking cop. Like, Harry Potter's a fucking cop. Like, these guys are just like magic imperialists. And all it really takes for them to tilt over into being overt, crazed Nazi types is for just one of them to be more powerful than the rest of them. Right? Like, that's the whole shtick. Like, Voldemort's just more powerful than the rest of them. He just has the natural, innate ability to cast better magic and be stronger. And so the entire thing subserviates itself into Nazism if they can't literally fight a war to stop it. And so the whole structure of the and they literally have slaves, like, and it's very explicitly stated throughout the entire thing, right? Hermione is fighting against this idea that they have house elves who are literally slaves, and everybody's just like, yeah, house elves, they're slaves. That's cool. Normal, right? And Hermione's considered the odd one out because she's like, they shouldn't be slaves, and the wizards are like, it's always been that way. Right? And so if you attempt to have a moral conversation about the world of Harry Potter, these contradictions or these obvious and clearly unacceptable things just come into your face because it's a children's story. Like, it's just a fucking story about like a magic, like, she wasn't sitting down, like, Rowling wasn't writing, like, trying to write like a cohesive universe that made sense and all the rules connect and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's not what she was doing. She literally was like, you know what would be silly? An old man with a big white beard who acted like a kooky guy. Right? That's it. That's how she started the whole thing. The first book was this fucking big. Like, it just blew up. Right? Like, at no point was Rowling trying to make a moral statement of any kind outside of just like, wizard Nazis are scary and bad, and we should fight against wizard Nazis. It's like, yeah, that's not really a moral statement, It would be bad to live in a world that was run by wizard Nazis. I wouldn't want to. Infants focus on each shiniest object presented. Yeah. Also, Ozymandias, what the smartest human would probably be like. Yeah. Oh, well, Ozymandias, in my view, that's actually what a rich superhero would look like. Like, Ozymandias is what Batman would actually be. That he would... And he stands as like a figure for us to look at and be like, oh, that's why we shouldn't give one person $100 billion. Because if you give one person $100 billion, they can do really fucked up shit. Like, really fucked up, weird, disgraceful, disgusting shit. And they can just buy an island and have a bunch of scientists and do a whole fucking weird thing and cover his tracks the whole way. And then suddenly have this big event occur and shape world events from behind, and it's not even from behind the shadows, really. It's just like he has. We humans seem to lack this ability to understand the scale of things that a guy with $100 billion could actually do. Like, if you have $100 billion, you can buy an island. And once you get to that point where you can buy an island just as a person, right, then you're basically a James Bond villain, right? Like, how are you different than Dr. No? If you own an island and you can put whatever you want on the island and nobody comes and looks at your island, right? And you can just have like, you can have underground missile silos on your fucking private island and nobody knows about it, right? You can have like a Jeffrey Epstein situation and just nobody fucking knows about it. That guy, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. And like, the moment you have this island, like, obviously, like, the only reason to have an island is to do that kind of fucking shit on it, right? You don't need a fucking island. You don't need to buy an island, right? Like, if you want to go vacation somewhere, you have enough money, just go there. Just vacation there. That's fine. You don't need to own it. You don't need to also be the owner of this thing. The only reason to own an island is to do shit that everyone with any sense would be like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. You definitely shouldn't do that. But we've just completely handed over the keys. We've just handed over the keys to the kingdom. And we're like, yeah, it's totally cool that this guy has an island. One person owning an island is normal. I've been hearing more about Steven Universe. You're not the first person who has brought up Steven Universe to me, and I don't know anything about this. I think Steven Universe. Like, I straight up do not know what this is. Yeah. Steven Universe. It's like all gems and shit. He's like a gem kid, and like there's all this kind of stuff. If you ask me what show, Eric, good to see you. If you ask me what show that I think actually does capture some kind of moral understanding but doesn't jam it into your face, it's Adventure Time. Adventure Time is great. Like, they really the type of storytelling and the type of moral stories that they tell are way closer to like they're not trying to be like, sharing is good, kids, here's the lesson of the day. They really take like a moral relativist position and tell stories that are kind of haunting in a way. And one of my favorite episodes of Adventure Time is obviously a heavy critique of the military, that Finn needs to get his he has to go dentist because he's got a cavity in his tooth. And what it means to go dentist is that you go work for army ants and go fight in a war, like literally go fight in an army ant war, and then they'll fix up your tooth. And the best part about it is that at the end of the episode, when Finn leaves the army ants fighting war with his tooth fixed, he turns to everybody and goes, guys, you'll never believe what happened there. And then they all shush him. And he's not allowed to tell the story of what he experienced when he went to go dentist. And I was just like, yeah, this is a heavy critique of the military-industrial complex and how it exploits the necessities of the public in order to get military service out of them. And then once you leave, you're not permitted to say what happened, and the society doesn't care. Like, I thought it was pretty obvious when I saw it. And like, I love Adventure Time because it's got these, like, the cartoonish villain character is first presented to you. The Ice King is presented to you as kind of the classic, I'm the bad guy and I'm coming in to ruin your day and all this. And then as the show goes on, it just becomes more and more obvious that he's just like an old man with dementia, basically. Like, the story of the Ice King is that he's a man who, in order to protect the people around him, put on this magical crown that gave him ice powers, but also drives him insane. And through the process of his becoming insane, he loses himself, he loses who he is. And so he does end up being just this person with immense powers who is like just a guy with dementia. He becomes this extremely complex and interesting character. In very and it's all told in like these very small snippets as the show goes on. The world building of Adventure Time is so amazing. Is so amazing. That guy, I would buy an island for benevolent reasons. Yeah, right, bud. Like straight up, like hard pass on that idea. Yeah, right. There's literally no such thing as buying a island for benevolent reasons. Like it just doesn't exist. Like I think the most, like you could buy an island for banal reasons. Like you could buy an island and like, yeah, I vacation there. You know, I have a vacation house there and I go there to vacation. I'd be like, okay, that's like banal, right? But it's not good. It just exists. It's just okay, yeah, you have the wealth and the money to be able to do that, and so you are, and so okay, good for you, right? You're not helping anybody other than yourself. But I don't believe for a minute that it stops there. I think literally every person alive suddenly starts to be like, you know, I've got private jets and a private... Like, the thing that really blows me away about the Jeffrey Epstein story is that they kept track of who was on the flights. Like, that to me is actually incredible. That, like, the ruling class is so convinced that this will not come back around to bite them in the ass that they're fine just being like, yeah, we're going to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island, better write it down. Like, that's astounding. That's astounding. that, like, Bill Clinton's name is in this book. Donald Trump's name is in this book of just like, yep, Donald Trump was on the flight, and we are for sure keeping track of that 100%, so we'll know it for the future. And the ruling class is like, yeah, sure, write that down. I don't give a fuck. Nothing's going to happen to me. I don't give a shit. And they're right. Like, nothing's happening to them. No one gives a shit. Edward Allen, the Marxian theory of history is so materially and morally empowering. They'll never get it back into the bottle. Yeah, I mean, that's why the society needs to fund, like, babbling children. Like, going back and listening to Jordan Peterson now, like, boy, is he a babbling child. Like, just babbling about nonsense so that you'll get, like, stuck in this stupid pattern of thinking when there's, like, straight up, like, there are owners and there are people who are owned. And we should probably accept that that's true. It's like, oh, yeah, that's right in front of our faces every single day. Like, but we just aren't permitted to talk about it. Like, straight up, like, that we have to create these odd narratives of what it is to be alive in the society as if it's this natural structure and blah, 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 blah. When it's like, no, like, your ancestors literally picked up weapons and beat the shit out of people and killed them and then wrote down laws to secure that power for themselves and then passed it down to their children. And there are owners, and that's why they are owners. And it's obviously the case. Like, it's blatantly and obviously the case. And then the people who didn't do that or who were victims of that have to work for them. And if they don't work for them, then they can't get access to food and shelter. And it's, like, obviously and blatantly the case. But capitalists can't actually argue that point because they know it's so fucking overwhelmingly the truth that for them to stand up and deny it outright would reveal that they're, like, lunatics. And so they just don't even acknowledge it. It's just not part of the conversation. It just doesn't enter. And then when they talk about communism, they've got to be like, oh, 100 billion dead and all this, because it's all they've got. They can't actually talk about what it is. They've got to talk about this other thing over here. They've got to manufacture a controversy over here. Because if they were to actually talk about the thing itself, they lose so badly, so fast, and they know it. Right? They know Adam says, more insight into the term Western, kinda. Friend from Mexico said that people in Latin America will sometimes mess around with folks from the U.S. when tourists from U.S. in Latin America say that they are American. People will say, yeah, so what? So are we. Yeah. It's so easy to mess with Americans, dude. They're so just like full of bravado and bluster. Avatar: The Last Airbender is very like Avatar: The Last Airbender might be some of the best television ever made. Like the Zuko's arc, especially like the arc that Zuko goes on is like Zuko stands as one of the best told stories in television history for sure. Like for sure. Going from being this boy who is hunting the Avatar to becoming an ally of the Avatar in order to defeat his own father is Shakespearean in its scale. And is what I talk about when I talk about how modern storytelling sucks. Like Zuko goes on a journey, man. Like he starts as this angry, betrayed child who is on this quest to regain the honor of his father, right? To gain the love of his father, who's a psychopath, and he goes from that to becoming like a proper man who has his own journey and his own path and understands that his father is a psychopath. So instead of trying to earn his father's love, he understands that his father needs to be defeated. And that's a crazy story and a crazy journey. And what's so beautiful about that story is there's no wasted space. Like I don't think that they could remove any piece of it and have it be a better story. Like at no point did I think it was a stretch, right? And Iroh and all and his beautiful part of it. Like Uncle Iroh is such a beautiful character. The song that he sings about his own son's death in the war, right? And his opining on the pointlessness of war and his understanding that there are things that are more important than domination or control, any of these sorts of things. And then and just the whole conversation surrounding like war and power and what it means to live in balance with one another, to try to find harmony with one another. And Aang's struggle of how do you resolve these conflicts without killing someone, like his own struggle of how to that he is put on this path to collide with this big scary figure, the Fire Lord, and he's being told even by his own past selves that he has to kill this guy, and it's explicitly stated at one point. I remember there was this one moment where Aang is put on trial as the Avatar because a previous generation of the Avatar killed the leader of this village. And so Aang gets put on trial for it. And the whole time he's trying to prove to these people that, no, there's no way I killed this person. No, there's no way I killed this person. This definitely didn't happen, and I'm going to prove it. And it goes on this whole thing and so on and so forth. And it all results in Aang entering the Avatar state, and then the previous Avatar manifesting and essentially saying, fuck yeah, I killed that guy, and he deserved it. Absolutely. It's just like, oh shit. and then and Aang needing to come to terms with how to resolve this, how to maintain his own integrity and his own principles while simultaneously doing what must be done. And then the solution he comes up with is disarmament. That's basically what it is. It's just take the weapon away, right? Neutralize the threat without killing the person is essentially what he comes to. I wanted to ask if you see the new show Velma. What do you think about it? I didn't see it. I was talking about it earlier, Eric. It's obviously just cynical storytelling. It's using all of this woke stuff in the most cynical way, and while simultaneously destroying yet another intellectual property, it's just stirring up controversy. That's all it is. It's not interested in telling a good story. It's not interested in building on the previous characters. It's not interested in all of that. It's 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 just taking yet another intellectual property and scorched earthing it in order to get eyeballs on the screen. So, and again, it's what I've been saying about all media these days. Stop watching this stuff. So watch literally anything else. Watch literally anything else. Like, it's not valuable. It's not worth watching. The only reason someone should watch it is to, and the only reason anyone would actually watch this is out of A, curiosity, or B, to actually be like, oh, oh, and it's a waste of your life. It's a waste of your time. A good way to get your island invaded is to call it communist. Yeah, good point. Good point. Well, yeah, I mean, the figure of Velma herself is such an aberration. Like, it's such a bastardization of who the character actually was, right? And like, they clearly are just destroying IPs and trying to protect themselves. They put up the shield of identity politics and say, if you don't like this, then you're a racist. Right? And they want to draw a battle line. And so they want people on the one side, the quote-unquote woke crowd, to come to the defense and be like, yes, this is correct. And if you disagree with any of this, then you're a bigoted white supremacist, so on and so forth. And then they want people on the other side to be like, oh, you've destroyed it all. And so they want the fight, because the fight is what generates money. Right? And if we all just stood up and said, oh, you made garbage, and then took it and put it in the garbage bin and didn't watch it, then they'd probably stop doing it. But we're suckers, so we just keep doing it. My island's ICBMs are for defensive purposes only. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. This is a defensive first strike. Is the idea, this is from Mr. Moon, is the idea that capitalism is irrevocably fucked even radical anymore? It feels like it's apathetically accepted by most, and that's the problem. I mean, Dude, I actually really think that what is happening in that regard is that it's got wide acceptance, but it's got wide acceptance amongst people who have no power. And that the people who have power, even the people who have power might actually stand up and be like, yeah, it's not working, but I'm not going to do anything about it. I have power. I've got money. I've got power. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to reform the system. I'm not going to fund a reformation of the system even, right? Or let alone a revolution. And if you ask me, the big shifts that actually is going to happen in the society, like the big shift that's going to happen in the society is the death of the boomers. And I know that I get criticized for saying it, but when I talk about the boomers, I'm talking about like a group of people, right? I'm not talking about individuals. I'm sure that everybody says it. There are individually boomers who are good. Great. As a group, right, there is an ethos that exists, and they have all of the wealth and all of the power, right? And they're going to die. And then you're going to end up with millennials and Gen Z, and then whatever comes next, the apocalypse kids, right? And they're the ones that are going to be running the show. And I just think you're going to end up with a whole bunch of people who are just going to be like, yeah, that's all fucking stupid as shit, and we're not doing any of it. No, we're not voting for that. Like, it's going to fundamentally alter the fabric of the society in big and significant ways. And I think that a big reason why we're seeing this real push, a backlash against diversity and against all this kind of thinking and all this kind of stuff, is because it is the last gasp of the boomer generation. That these people who have power are like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, right? You will not say, okay, boomer to me, right? That like, the Gen Z kids are standing up and being like, okay, boomer, and they're just moving on with their lives. And like, the boomers are not accepting that. So there's this like reassertion that while they're on their way to the graveyard, they're like, this is how the world is. This is how the world is. And that's going to end. It's going to end because it has to end, because they die, and then you'll have like Gen X, who have only ever been going along with it because they had no power ever, right? Uh, uh, and they're sick of it too because they're getting betrayed, right? And they've been betrayed the whole time, right? They've been betrayed the whole fucking time. And then you're going to end up with millennials who are like, yeah, we were betrayed from day one. Like this, like fuck your dumb idea. Like work hard, grind stuff, right? Like I'm sure that they're like a small minority of lunatics who are off in the fringes, right? But the mass of the millennial population has been like, yeah, this whole thing sucked. We got less. We worked harder. We're not even having sex, right? We're not even having sex. Like why is everything so expensive? I'm not even having fun. Right? Where's my free love movement? Where's my fucking big Woodstock? Where's any of that shit? None of that happened. Where's any of it? Oh, go fucking work. Like, yeah. And then Gen Z is literally like born into it. They never even experienced like a glimmering, even in the media, the idea that there's a cohesive narrative of any sort. Literally from day one, it's been fuck you. Work hard, you piece of fucking shit, and maybe we'll give you an apartment. Like, this whole boomer ethos of like, yeah, I worked hard with my high school education, and I got a house, 3 kids, a car, and you just must be lazy. It's just literally going to die. It's literally going to die. So, that's going to, by itself, be a fundamental change in how the society is. And is it going to be suddenly rainbow and sunshine and utopia? Obviously not. The capitalist class isn't just going to give up, right? They're not suddenly going to have a last, like, they're not going to have a come to Jesus moment and be like, oh, the boomers are dead. Oh, let's give all the money away, right? But a lot of the hardliners will just be dead. Right? A lot of the people who would actually like show up and fund think tanks and all this kind of stuff, like a lot of them will just be dead. And it is going to fundamentally alter the society. Because they'll just be fucking dead. Hey, we still have One Piece yet still being written. Yeah, dude. I've gotten to, they're in the Cloud Island now. The last episode I just watched was Chopper being saved by that dude on the flying bird. I don't remember his name, but there's a bazillion episodes of One Piece, dude. They're gonna write that thing forever. I feel like they're literally writing One Piece while I'm watching it. That like there's just always going to be like an infinite amount of One Piece, that I'm like watching a half-hour episode of One Piece and it takes them a half hour to make the next episode, and so you never ever catch up. You're always behind. That's what watching One Piece is like. Great rant burst. Yeah, welcome to the channel, Edward. That's who I am. But donate some money. How about become a Patreon, right? Communism is about coercion. Communism is about coercion since it's about state power. Well, capitalism is about freedom, and if you're anti-capitalist, then you're anti-freedom. Yeah. And, like, so much of the conversation surrounding communism and surrounding freedom and capitalism is just dumb. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, literally the only thing that communists are saying is there are owners and there are owned, and that arrangement is illegitimate. And the capitalists can't like, they can't put it together. They can't engage it. They can't seriously engage it because it's so obviously the truth. Like, it's so overwhelmingly and obviously the truth that to try to fight against it, you just sound like a fucking Nazi instantly. That, like, what, you're denying that there are people who own the society, and you're denying that there are people who work for those people? Like, you're a loser. Like, immediately. And it's obvious. That's why I don't get into the debate bro shit. Right? These guys are like, debate me, bro. And I'm like, dude, like, I literally am saying 1 + 1 = 2, and you're saying, no, it isn't. Like, it's not a debate. This photo makes me want to quit life. I'll see you all the next one, comrades, or whatever comes next. This photo is a photo. It's everything wrong with the world. What, this one? Yeah, it's tough. Like, it's tough. Oh, here's something I wanted to show you guys that's on this. So Chat GPT has a left-wing bias study, right? So the whole, I'm not going to read the article, but the whole idea is that they're like, oh, we've been quizzing it and giving it political things and so on and so forth, and it keeps coming up with a left-wing bias. This is the one that I found very interesting, right? Pew Research Political Topology Quiz, and it keeps coming up establishment liberal. That's what's considered quote-unquote left-leaning in today's media. But look at the list, right? What do you got? So at the very top is progressive left. That's essentially Bernie Sanders, like AOC. That's considered progressive left. And there's nothing above it. There's no socialist. There's no communist, right? And then if you go down, right, Democratic mainstays, outsider left, stressed sideliners, ambivalent right, populist right, committed conservative, faith and flag conservatives, fascists. So the fascists are on the list. It's possible that ChatGPT is allowed to be a fascist, but it's not even permitted to be a communist. It's not even permitted. It isn't given the information. It isn't even given the fucking information to allowed to be a communist. It's not even on the list. And this, if you ask me, is what has happened in our society. That we are just omitting from the conversation this political reality and skewing everything to the extreme far right. Because essentially, if you're an establishment liberal, you're a conservative, right? You're a right-wing conservative. The progressive left are literally just people being like, shouldn't we have access to basic necessities? Like, isn't the whole point, right? And that's like barely left, right? Like, since when did standing up and saying people should be able to eat become a left-wing ideology? Since when is it a left-wing ideology to say if a person works a full-time job, they should be able to pay for their rent? Since when is that a left-wing ideology? But that's exactly what's happened in the society. That's how far to the right we've skewed. And you can see they've entrenched that skew because they're not even asking about anything left of literally Bernie Sanders. There's no conception of nationalization. There's no conception of, like, the most left-wing idea that exists in the society is tax the rich. Okay, so tax the rich, right? Funnel the money downward. Then what's going to happen? Everyone's going to spend the money in the systems that are owned by these guys and all go back up anyway. And then what are they going to use that money for? They're going to use it to dismantle that tax and put us back in this situation again. That's exactly what they're going to do. And if you stand up and say, maybe we should just eliminate the capitalist class entirely, maybe we should nationalize the means of production, maybe we should actually get rid of these guys, that's not even permitted. You're not even allowed to have that on the list. Like, and they're doing it obviously. They're doing it right in front of your face. Like, they don't care. Like, they literally don't care. I agree, re-boomers. I see it in my own parents. My dad will casually talk about housing prices regardless of how much I tell him how much it depresses me. Yeah, he literally can't help himself. Yeah. And just like 50-year-old Gen Xer, by the way. Yeah, I mean, and my dad's the same, right? Like, and it's tough because I kind of respect... One of the things I respect about my own father is he's a rural Manitoban man. He remembers electricity coming in. He remembers water coming in, like plumbing. Like, he remembers a time when to get water meant pulling it from a well. And so for him, he doesn't understand what we're complaining about. Like, he considers what he's living in to be like a technological Marvel world, right? And he doesn't seem to understand. And I don't think that the boomers do understand or ever will understand that that sense of being in a society that was building itself and that, like, I worked hard and sacrificed. Great, but you worked hard and sacrificed for a society that seemed to be expanding itself and unifying and moving outward, right? Forget about the whole colonial thing. They won't engage in that. They refuse to engage in it. That I think hits like a real, like, fritzing, like, oh my god, like, if they were to actually accept that, they would kill themselves, I think. The their experience has been one of growth and one of expansion into a thing, and they simply cannot accept and understand that growth is receding now, that it's coming back, and the only way that they can perceive or understand that oh, it's receding, well, that must mean you're not working hard enough, because we all worked and it went out and expanded. The idea that it's coming back, you guys are just buying avocado toast. You're wasting your money. You gotta work harder, right? And that whole ethos is gonna die. Like, it's just straight up gonna die. And what's gonna be left is people being like, yeah, this receded because all of the wealth went over here. Like, instead of it all being egalitarianly spread throughout the society, which is what the boomers experienced, it's been piled into a corner. And then we're told that the solution is just work for the one guy standing at the top, and the answer to that is go fuck yourself. Like, I have nothing but sympathy for the Gen Xers, man. Like, it is so obvious to me that Gen X was literally a generation that understood everything I'm talking about. But just, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Like, for real. Like, what are you going to do? There's no solution. You're a minority group. You a lot of that gets articulated in, like, the music of Smashing Pumpkins and the Nirvana and all these kind of rockers in the 90s, right? That I feel like Gen X is just like, okay, well, we got to get on. And the solution that Gen X came to was find something to sell to these boomers, right? And try to just get through in that regard. And I see a lot of Gen X people who are extremely disillusioned because of that experience. It's a trauma that has been inflicted upon the Gen X people, that this sense of abandonment that I talk about has always been the Gen X experience. That Gen X was basically told, work hard or you're a loser. And there was no one to turn to. Like, literally no one. That all of the left-wing icons and all of that were literally shot in the streets. Like, the boomers couldn't have said it clearer. If you stand up and talk out against the system publicly and become a public figure, we'll literally murder you. Like, so there's just no hope whatsoever for Gen X. But at least Gen X still had access to a certain amount of the wealth, that there still was, like, a piece of it that they were able to get a hold of, even though it is by subserviating themselves to this system that's obviously betraying them. And it's not until the millennials come around and this, by the time the millennials come around, the system has actually turned against the populace. That Gen X is put in an unfortunate situation, but the trajectory and the momentum of the society is still work hard and you'll be part of this. Like, you'll get the house, you'll get the thing, right? Do the thing. And sure, you gotta do it by selling dumb shit to boomers, but it's still there, right? But by the time the millennials have come around, the society has actually turned against the populace. And you can see that most evidently in the student debt crisis. Like, it's so obvious. Like, literally, we're going to saddle an entire generation of kids with enormous amounts of debt because they want to know things. Like, it's the perfect recipe for social decay. And then now, so when the boomers go, my concern about Gen X is that they'll just be so depleted. They'll be such a depleted and traumatized force that they simply won't believe it is possible for this to change. And my hope is that they'll just not stand in the way. Like the boomers are standing in the way, and have dug their heels in and refused to move, and like literally fund like neo-Nazi organizations in order to get rid of CRT in high schools and shit, right? But I bet that Gen X will just be like, you can try. I think that'll be the attitude of Gen X. Oh yeah, you can try, right? Which, in my opinion, is good enough. Like Gen X people put in their time, if you ask me. There's some no future anarchy energy for sure. Yeah. Thought you were done with One Piece. I put it on while I work out. It's actually really great to work out to. I've been working out a lot more. I'm really proud of myself, actually. I think I'm going to get into a good position pretty quickly. I can guarantee it will end because Oda did announce that he is now writing the final arc. But I don't know how you feel. How do you like the Sky P arc so far? That honestly, the Sky Place arc feels very like we don't know what else to do. If I had to be like really honest, it really does have that sort of sense of like, okay, well, we saved a kingdom. What else can these guys do? Let's send them to a Sky Palace. You know? Like it's like and most series do this, so it's not unique to One Piece, but it's just like it's like this constant you need to top what you did next. And eventually it just gets so fucking ludicrous that they might as well be like, you know, they're literally in heaven right now. There are literally guys with like angel wings and shit. Like it's I mean, but once you accept it, like once you buy in, it's like, okay, cool. Like this is what they're doing. This is great. But how do they possibly top it? You know? And I don't know. I feel like this whole arc of them being up in the Sky Palace and all that kind of stuff is kind of I bet anything. Most anime have this where there's a season or an arc or something that you could just sort of take out and it wouldn't matter. And I suspect that this whole thing in the clouds that they're doing is just like, yeah, they could probably just take that out and it wouldn't really matter. You know, we'll see. But it has that sort of sense about it. Was I surprised that Robin joined the crew? Not really. Not really. I was told we'd have free speech. Crisis of imagination, collective dissociation from reality, capitalist realism is omnipresent. Yeah. The idea that capitalism is the end of history, that we can never do better or reform or change or get away from capitalism. Yeah. And one of the things, you know what? I'm going to go use the bathroom really quick, and then I'm going to talk on this point, Edward. I'll be right back, guys. One second. That the what the hell was I talking about? Oh yeah, I completely I don't have the smoking gun on this, so this is actually very conspiratorial. And I try really hard to stay away from conspiracy and keep things into no, we've got the verified document. That's what I prefer. But I am willing to delve into the conspiracy because we have enough of a background on the organization, the CIA, that if it came out that the CIA was literally brainwashing people with this stuff, if they were taking these smartphones and putting in signals and people and putting in trigger words and shit and hypnotizing people through them, I'd be like, yeah. Yeah. If it came, if we had another church commission and we did a big audit of the CIA and found out all of the shit that they were getting up to in the modern era, because we don't know what they're doing. We haven't had a real audit of these guys since like the 70s, for God's sake. So like 50 years. Like we had one commission that went in to investigate their torture programs, but we don't really know what they're doing. And if we had another one of these, if it all happened, it all came out that they were like literally actively trying to hypnotize people through smartphone technology, I'd be like, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised by it. I wouldn't deny it for a second. I'd literally hold up the document and be like, called it, because it's what it feels like. It's what it feels like. It feels like when you say the word communism, people's ability to critically analyze or be critically aware or intelligent or smart in any way is gone. And what you're left with is a scared little monkey that's going, "Arr!" That's what it feels like. And I feel like they've done this with words like sharing, compassion, egalitarianism, communism, certainly socialism. Like, I just think we're living in a moment where these technologies are being used against us. And that's, I completely admit, this is conspiratorial. But if it all came out that was the truth, and the foundation, why I'm able to operate from that is because like we know about MK Ultra. Like the things that we know about already show us that the CIA is deeply interested in mind control technology. Like it's deeply interested in that. That's what it was doing with psychedelics. That's what MK Ultra was all about. It's all about social and media manipulation. And so if the CIA came up with a way to literally hypnotize people, and we know people can be hypnotized, like that's the other side of it. I have seen enough from the hypnosis community to know that hypnosis is real and it is something that can happen to you. And so it doesn't really take a genius to be like, CIA wants to control people, mind control technology, has researched and is interested in mind control. People can be hypnotized. I've literally seen people be hypnotized through screens. Like, there is a hypnotist who has done this, and it is on YouTube. You can find it. Where the most prominent one I've ever seen is a guy who stood in front of a video game console, and then he was hypnotized into a hypnotic trance. They moved him into a warehouse, snapped him out of the hypnosis, and then like had him in a zombie game where people were pretending to be zombies, and he had a gun in his hand, and he like freaked out. And then the hypnotist came back in, hypnotized him, put him back in the trance. They moved him back to the bar he was in, put him in front of the video game machine, and he came out of it and he was like, man, what a great game, right? So we know people can be hypnotized through screens. We've seen it. There's all the evidence in the world for it. And we know the CIA is interested in mind control technology. Here you go. We all have one of these. We all have one of these. Like, you're telling me they're not even trying? I think you're crazy. Like, I think the ball's in your court, honestly. And I suspect it'll all come out, that there'll be another church commission or something. And we'll get like a document and be like, yep, they were using like Twitter. They were using this app. They were using this thing to fucking just communism 100 billion iPhone. Like, mark my words. Mark them now and mark them well. It'll all come out and I'll be right yet again. Fight communism. Say no to tap water. That's weird. People should have a home, food to eat, clean water to drink, and clean air to breathe. It's pretty much that simple. Yeah. And it's why I keep talking about this hypnosis thing, because it's like, it is simple. Like, I feel, and I've said this several times, and I'm going to keep saying it because I think it's absolutely the truth. I feel like all I'm doing is pointing at the naked emperor saying that man is naked. Like, just pointing at something that is patently obvious, that everyone knows is true. It's just, I'm just going, yeah, there it is, right? and people either, but we're in this like odd little phase where there's enough people who go, no, he's definitely wearing clothing. He's definitely wearing clothing. Yeah, you're just not pure of heart. That's why you can't see it. Yeah, they're just so deeply in denial or hypnotized. It's no freaking wonder that conservatives think that socialism means that government owns the means of production. Yeah, the government does stuff. That's socialism. Adam says, good point about when you did the right. Yeah, when did the right to eating become a lefty thing? Yeah, didn't Marx or Lenin write about not working equally, not eating? I mean, the statements. This has become a bastardization. Like, the phrase is, those who do not work do not eat, right? But that was always directed at the capitalist class, right? Those who do not work, the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, right, do not eat. But it's been bastardized into if you are disabled or poor. Like, Nazis have taken the phrase and been like, that's what they actually meant. If you're poor and disabled, then that's why Nazism and communism are the same. Horseshoe theory. Right? So they just bastardize it and change it to something it wasn't originally intended to be. Danica said, government provided the water and electricity to rural Manitoba. Yeah, if it was up to the electricity and water companies, rural communities in Canada wouldn't have any of those things. Yeah. No, and they'll never admit that. Like, if you ask me, the most hysterical thing, and it's like a joke, it's just a pathetic joke, is that you have all of these rural conservative types who are, like, grew up on rural farms. We even had a guy in here the other day that was talking about this, that I was talking about this too. Like, where did they get their land from? You just need to ask these conservative guys. If there's a conservative who is a farmer or a rancher or any of that kind of stuff, ask them to their face, how'd you get your land? And they will always tell you, well, my dad gave it to me. And maybe they'll shuffle their feet and be like, well, I cut a deal with my father to be able to... So they got land from their daddy, basically. And then if you ask them, okay, well, where did he get that land from? And he'll be like, well, he got it from his dad. And you'll say, oh, okay. And eventually what will happen is he'll say, well, when we immigrated to Canada or the United States, we got land. Because the Homesteaders Act and the Canadian Dominion Act allowed white British men, it's explicit in the document, white British men, to move to the prairies and to move to the prairie states and get 360 acres of free land. Just literally, just like, if you can get here, free land. That's why everybody got in these fucking buggies, and that's why they did it. Because there's fucking 360 acres of free land waiting for them. It's the largest government handout that in the history of the nation, and the very people who are the inheritors of that massive government handout turn around and say, if you need a government handout, you're weak, you just need to work harder. It's a joke. It's a pathetic joke, which is exactly why our society is failing, because our entire culture is based on a pathetic joke. That the wealthiest, most well-entrenched inheritors of wealth got that way because of a government handout. And they just won't admit it. Lately, I've been arguing that conservatives are worse than liberals because they literally destroy our society and refuse to take responsibility for the mess they have created. I mean, that's both of them. They're both like that. Like, the only difference I see between a liberal and conservative is that a liberal will tilt its head and go, oh, that's it. Like, that's it. I don't see any difference between these two guys. That liberals and conservatives are fundamentally the same, just that a conservative will be like, tough up! And a liberal will be like, that's too bad for you. And then they'll both vote to destroy you. Like, they don't give a shit about you. That's it. So I don't really see a difference between... And nor do I see the value in saying which one of these two are worse or better, because to me they're the same. Like, the only difference is exclusively aesthetic. That's it. Do you want to vote for this guy, or do you want to vote for this guy? That's it. Because they vote the same way, they do the same things, they support the same people, they support the same systems, right? Economically, it's literally like, go work for us. That's it. So I don't really see a difference. Yeah, ask the people in indigenous communities who don't have electricity and running water. Absolutely. Yeah, U.S. student debt, one of the U.S.'s largest assets. Yeah, absolutely despicable. D. Marie, how you doing, D. Marie? How's it going? How was the turnout Sunday? Sunday, was it? I'm in the U.S. or I would have gone. I don't know what you're talking about, so I assume that wasn't the thing. Are you talking about the protest that is supposed to be happening February 21st? Yeah, you thought it was January 21st. Nope, February 21st. There is a protest planned, Queen's Park, February 21st, 11 a.m. Hopefully that turns into a bigger thing. We'll see. We'll see. And I know that I'm able to go, so I'm going to go. But we'll see. We'll see what it turns into. Have a good one, Mr. Moon. The best advice I can give for getting in shape is consistency and honoring your personal promises. Doesn't matter how hard you go, just go. Yeah, the body will follow. It has no choice. Yeah, my strategy, Content, is when I get home from work, just do it. Don't sit down, don't do a thing, just literally walk in the door, take care of my dog, right? Put the video on, do the workout. And that seems to be working out really nicely. So just carry the energy of the workday, and that's just that's the end of the workday. So instead of it being like, oh, I got to go grind up and do a special thing or do this kind of thing, right? Like it's just a continuation of the workday, and that seems to be working out really nicely for me. So you're falling for the Skype trap. There are a lot of people who feel exactly the same way you do. Without spoiling the series, everyone who skipped Skype, everyone who has skipped Skype all ended up regretting it. Yeah, I rarely skip these things because who knows, right? And One Piece is actually particularly like this, I find. That they really like hold them back and hold them back and hold them back. It's the most obvious iteration of this was near the beginning of the season, of the series, when Luffy, like, it's often the case that, like, when Luffy shows up, he's going to solve the problem, right? Like, that's usually how, that seems to be the structure of it. That something is happening and all the characters are caught up in it, and Luffy's over here. And Luffy's going to show up, and Luffy's going to solve the problem. But it's the process of Luffy getting there. And it's not as simple as just, like, get him there. He has to, there's hurdles and difficulties and all this kind of stuff that's in his way, right? But when he shows up, the problem is solved, right? And if the problem isn't immediately solved, then it's the process of Luffy solving the problem. But until Luffy shows up, the problem can't be solved, right? And the show does a really good job of, like, really pulling that out and, like, being like, okay, that's the thing, and everybody's over here and Luffy's over here, and I suspect that's more or less what's happening, right? Luffy's over here, and this time he's with Ozu and the blonde guy's name, I forget his name. And they're dealing with this problem, but there's another problem over here. And eventually that will all converge, and something will happen. And I just feel like the Sky P, I mean, there's a whole them getting there part of it. And so I feel like because... like, I feel like I'm probably here right now in it, right? That this is when it becomes clear what the ending is going to look like, and then there's a couple episodes where it goes like that. So I'm right here. And this is usually when I do get impatient with the arc. Because One Piece, like a lot of anime, really pulls it out. Like, they really, really pull it out. Like, one one of the things that's really interesting about anime and the Japanese storytelling idea is that every character is honored. Like there's just no such thing as a throwaway character. And that was something that was, when I was younger, I was like really like, because we're so used to seeing throwaway characters. There are characters who are just like only explicitly there to just be like, damn, and that's all they do, right? In Japanese anime, it's like, nope, if they're in the room, they have a perspective, they have a past, they have a history, and you're going to know all about it. And so when an event happens, like Dragon Ball Z is the greatest example of this, right? Like Goku begins to power up. And they could go, Goku begins to power up, and then Goku powers up and punches the guy and it's over. But that's not what happens. It's Goku begins to power up, and so they cut to Vegeta. And Vegeta's got an opinion. And then they cut to Krillin. And Krillin's got an opinion. And Bulma's got an opinion. And this guy has an opinion. And that guy has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion and a perspective and an idea and a reaction to what's happening. And oftentimes they'll also, like the big power-up will begin happening. And you as the audience member are like, it's finally happening. Here we go. And then that'll be the end of the episode. And then the next episode won't be the power-up thing. It'll literally be, hey, this side character who's been coming along this whole time, now we're going to do a flashback into his past and talk about him and connect him, this like little side character who you've been completely ignoring or been unaware of this whole time, and we're going to connect him into this power-up moment so that he becomes elevated in the discourse in a way like he used to be a throwaway, and now he's part of this moment. This like enormous elevated moment we've all been looking for, and now this guy who's off on the side is now part of it. And anime does that a lot, and I really, really love it. Like, I used to really hate it because I used to be like, get on with it. But now I really see that it's like, no, that really makes this guy special. That gives, that creates a very special thing in that narrative and in that structure. So every time Goku powers up, from now on, we'll think of that. We'll think of this person. We'll think of that event, right? That'll be part of the narrative. And I feel like One Piece is like that too. And of course One Piece is like that. It's like One Piece is very like traditional Japanese anime in many ways. And that's definitely, they don't fuck around with that. Like you really get like extended stuff. But it doesn't mean that I don't get fucking impatient with it. Because like you do get to a point eventually where you're like, fucking shit, just resolve it. Just do it. Like Luffy saving the kingdom was like, when he finally showed up, I was like, thank Christ, like, come on. But they do that on purpose. They know that you're going to be like that. They know that you're going to be like, fucking come on, let's go. Because that builds up the tension and builds up the suspense so that when it finally happens, you go, yeah, fuck yeah, right? So you feel something. And if you don't build up that tension, if you don't build up the like, oh, then you don't get the release. And so you don't get one without the other. And I'm just in this moment with this Sky thing where I'm like, get to it. And they've done it. They've done it every time. Every single time it's been the same, where it's been like, yeah. And I've always felt yeah. So they've never let me down. Not yet, anyway. We'll see. Anime. I love anime, man. And they really know what they're up to. Adam says, I saw people I know hypnotized who were crying on stage. Yeah, they were not actors, not known to me to share feelings like that. Which feelings? Crying over dead childhood pets. Yeah, I'm a believer. Most infamous hypnotizing, I believe, is Saran. Intentional ideological reinforcement and limiting very gradual shapes the perceiver. Yeah, I think this is all absolutely true. This reminds me of the recent thing I came across with conservatives. Cherry pick a quote from Marx where he says, I sold my soul to the devil and I won't be able to get to heaven. I literally tracked down where the quote comes from, and it's literally a love poem that he wrote to his wife. Yeah, talk about taking things out of context. Yeah, that's what capitalists are good at. a system engineered to reward sociopathy gets more of it until, yeah. And that's something to remember, right? Like, capitalists want to turn the conversation into a moral conversation because it's all they've got left. They know that if it becomes a practical conversation, they lose instantly. Like, straight up, like, hey guys, I should own everything and you should work for me. Like, you lose. Just like on a basic practical level, instantly. And so they have to turn everything into a moral conversation because it's all they have left. And we've got to, and I'm saying this for myself really, I've got to remind myself to bring it back to the practical. Because what I'm discussing is not a moral conversation, right? That there is a problem, it should be solved, here is the problem, this is the solution. And when you stand up and try to create a moral conversation, you have no basis to, like, you don't have the basis to be, like, moral. And capitalists are amoral. Like, they don't, like, it's interesting how they'll stand up and say, like, oh, the free market will decide, right? Because that's the force and it's amoral. But when it comes time to actually be rid of capitalism, suddenly they're moral teachers, right? They have no basis for being a moral preacher at all. The fact that they feel like they can stand up and actually make a statement of morality that should be taken seriously at all shows you how fucking arrogant and clueless these people are. Like, you can't be a capitalist and be moral. Like, shut up. Like, you don't get an opinion. My brother in Christ, I do the same thing. Ride bike home, get straight to lifting. Yeah. That, to me, that's the thing to do. Right? That's the thing to do. Just build it into your work day. Don't fuck around with it. Like, and then when it's your day off, take a day off. Right? Like, let your body recover. Maybe do some stretching or something, but, like, don't feel like you got to gear up to, like, really do it. Like, actually take the day off, right? There's no shame in that. And I just feel like I'm getting about a half hour to an hour, depending on my energy level and how I'm feeling, how well did I sleep, all that kind of stuff. And what's cool to see is that it's because I went through a real period of, like, being really in shape. I was really in shape pre-COVID. And because of that, I'm taking to it a lot faster than I thought I would. I have to be gentle because I'm old, right? I'm 40 now, and so I definitely, when I first started working out again, the day after the first workout I did, my glutes were like, if you had done one more squat, you wouldn't be walking. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm doing it smart. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. But one thing that's definitely happening is that I'm doing arm exercises and I only have 10-pound weights. And initially I was like, that's fine. I can do these arm exercises. This is my first time back. I'll do the arm exercises and maybe in a month I'll have to go get more weights. Literally, I've done 2 arm workouts, and the second time I did the arm workout, I was like, 10 pounds not enough. I need more than this. And it was instant. So it's, I think not tomorrow, but the day after, I'm actually going to go get some weights. Just a small criticism, your pronunciation of Skype is wrong. It's because I'm watching the show while I'm working out, so I'm only kind of paying attention. I'm getting the broader strokes, like all the like I couldn't tell you people's names. You know what I mean? It's literally Skypea. Oh yeah, now that you said it, yeah, now I remember Skypea. Secondly, wait, where are you in the arc? Did you meet Inaru yet? No, haven't met Inaru yet. Literally the episode I just watched was Chopper is on the boat by himself, and he just blew the whistle to be saved from one of the angel attackers by the former protector guy who showed up previously, who's got the shape-shifting Pegasus. I don't remember his name, but that's literally the episode that I just watched. I have to say, I'm jealous you can work out. COVID's literally preventing me to work out. Dude, yeah, the long COVID, man. And that's still happening to you, eh, bud? Like, that's astounding to me, man. Like, it's astounding that my favorite thing that we're doing as a people, no doubt, is that we're all just like, COVID's over. We did it. COVID's done. We're gonna get so sideblinded, dude. We're gonna get so sideblinded. Like another thing is gonna roll through, and the difference is that this time the anti-vax crowd or the anti-mask wearing crowd have like little communities now, and so when it rolls through, these little kooky communities are gonna be able to organize quickly, and do dumb shit, while the rest of us are just like, just fucking put a piece of cloth on your face. Like, shut up. It's so stupid. I hate resistance bands. I hate resistance bands. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right about the pull-up bar. I want to get a pull-up bar for sure. And I'm going to put it, I got a door frame right over here, and I'm going to put it right in there. And I'm not going to fuck around with the, like, slip-in insert. I'm literally going to be like, bar, drill, 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 drill. That's what I'm going to do. Because, no, I agree with the pull-up bar. It is just like, it hits differently. It just hits differently. And it's so easy. I remember I had a pull-up bar at one point, and I just had it set up so that, like, every time I walked through the doorway, I just did some pull-ups, right? You just walk through the doorway, pull up, pull up, pull up, right? And, you know, what's great about working out is that there is a moment where, like, you feel really good doing it. And that's happening to me a lot sooner than I thought it was going to. D. Marie, I'm 41, just going back to working out constantly with weights and whatnot. Sometimes I do yoga listening to me. Oh, well, it's a good time to stretch. How about that? That's interesting. Doing yoga while listening to me. That's I don't know what to think about that, Marie. That you're doing yoga listening to me. Feel like you're like working out while confronting the demon of the world. You're like really working out. By the way, I suggest you look up Back to the Science YouTube channel. That channel is using modern day research to disprove the anti-vax crowd. I mean, there just comes a point, dude, where like one of the things that I'm happy I have realized, and it's been recently, and it's helped, is like there are flat earthers. Like as soon as you understand, like, oh, there's flat earthers, like you could spend all your time disproving the flat earthers. It's not going to matter. Like, they're still going to be flat earthers. They're not going to suddenly be like, the earth is actually round. Yeah, well, I concede. Like, to get to the point where you're actually saying out loud to people and arguing it in a meaningful way that the earth is flat, like, you've just conceded something. There's just like a little thing that you've definitely taken and just put aside and just been like, yeah, I'm just going to believe that, right? And evidence, it's not happening with evidence. Right? It's not happening with evidence. It's so clearly an emotional reaction. And they're presenting themselves as rational because that's what people do. We post-rationalize, right? Like, we actually do not rationalize ahead of an event and then do the thing. Like if you do that you're doing that, that's called planning, right? And you're very specifically doing that thing. That's not what most people do. Like, most people just go and do things in the world and just act on their emotional selves and react to the world around them and then post-rationalize, right? That's what most people are doing. And I feel like that's essentially what flat earthers are and essentially what anti-vaxxers are and essentially what capitalists are doing, is that they're trying to post-rationalize something they've already done and already agreed on because they are running on their emotions and they want to believe that they're not. Right? They want to believe that they're actually intelligent people. We want to believe that we are brains in bodies. So we are logical, rational thinking people. When the truth is that we are bodies with brains. We're highly emotional most of the time. We're rarely thinking rationally. We're usually just reacting to stimuli around us. Right? And if we have to rationalize something, we do it after it already happened and after we already reacted to it. I know sometimes you get heated, it's not peaceful. I know, I'm trying my best with that, Marie. I'm like trying my best. I know that the show is the best when I'm calm. I know that's true. When I get too worked up and too heated, I end up being dissatisfied with my work. I'm more pleased when I'm calm. And it's difficult sometimes though, because sometimes shit happens and I'm like, I can't believe that we're still like Doug Ford privatizing the healthcare system. Like, we should be in a general strike right now. Like we should literally be shutting the province down. No one should go to work. Period. And that's not happening. So also, Dr. Campbell sold his soul to the anti-vax because he's able to get his number up. It's very easy to become popular if you spread disinformation. Yeah, it seems to be the way. Yeah, in a society and in a structure that rewards grifters, the best thing to do is become a grifter. Right? Peterson figured that out. Like, we love grifters. Like, we reward them. We vote them in as president. Like, we love grifters. And it's getting to the point now where, like, soon we will just have a grifter who shows up and is like, hey, I'm grifting you. Here's the grift. And he'll do it so well, it'll be like a magic show. You know, like, magicians are grifters, right? That they're lying to you. But it's okay because you've given them the consent, right? You've conceded, you've given consent. You're going to lie to me right now. And you're going to lie to me so effectively that I'm going to be impressed by it, right? Wow, what a great lie. You bamboozled me. What an amazing lie. It's so amazing. And we're basically that way on the political stage now, where we're just like, yeah, these guys are all liars and grifters. And so the guy that shows up and does the best lie and grifts the best, we're like, wow, did you see how well he lied? Look at how well he grifted us. Wow. And that's kind of where we're at. You know, it's like we're voting for magicians and pretending as though their magic is real. I dropped 50 pounds last year. Wow, grinning. Haven't gained any back. Starchitarian? Oh, did you do you did like a specific diet, eh? I don't believe in any of that. Unless it's something where, like, you have an allergy or, like, your food is attacking you, like a gluten thing, like is what I'm dealing with. I don't really buy into that idea of just like stop eating carbs or something. I'm just like eat what you like. But I mean, because my concern is that if you cut out carbs is the classic one, and then you eat any carbs, you just gain the weight back. Yeah, I feel your pain. Believe me, I do. Yeah, it's tough, eh? Being 40, eh, Marie? Trying to work out when you're 40, it's harder. It's more difficult. But, you know, slow and steady wins the race. Slow and steady wins the. Oh, you only eat carbs. Fantastic. Cotton, the anti-vaxxers that I want buried in a prison basement are the people who make up their illness, like faking seizures and shit. Yeah, dude. Yeah, like, I have a certain degree of sympathy for the anti-vax people. And I've said this the whole time. This isn't a revelation. Like, if your whole point as an anti-vax type is like, I don't trust these big pharmaceutical companies or the government, I'm like, yeah, like, I don't think that I can say anything to that. Because, like, yeah, like, why would you, right? I don't trust multi-billion-dollar corporations to tell me the truth about the product they're selling or the surrogates they bribe to put into positions of power, right? Like, I'm absolutely sure that if the tobacco community could have convinced us that smoking a pack a day was mandated and healthy for us, they would have, right? So that's where I get kind of sympathetic. And if that's the only argument they're making, then I'm like, yeah, okay. It's when they start getting real specific and start trying to pretend like they have science, where I'm just like, nah, probably not, bro. Like, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Like, if your only position is fuck these guys, I'm like, yeah, okay. I honestly think that I'm still going to be dealing with long COVID in a year's time. Right now, I'm trying to get a casual job as a way to get back to work. Ugh. What a journey you're on, Eric, man. Like, for real. Like, I feel like you should document it. Like, you talked to me a time back about a YouTube channel or a YouTube thing. Like, you really should be documenting it. You should be documenting what your experience is. You should be documenting what happens to you. And then you should be documenting your journey to try to get back into work. Like, I think that that's actually important, because I think that there isn't really like a face of long COVID. It's really been shunted and really been shut out. And what it really needs is an everyman. And I think you could be that everyman, right? And just like a once a week update of like, this is what I go through and this is what I do, right? Edward Allen, extremist round earthers should be reasonable centrists, settle for a curved flat earth. The flat earth thing, dude, is literally just me being like, oh yeah, this is how far we've fallen as a people. Like, who benefits from this? That's the best part. Like, at least the anti-vaxxers are like, who benefits? They do. The big multi-billion-dollar corporation and the government, they benefit. And I'm like, yeah, all right. I'm like, yeah. But the flat earth is like, who benefits from this lie? Like, they're the big rounders are trying to convince us that the earth is round when really it's flat. Like, why? Why would they do this? What possible motivation could any organization actually have to try to convince anyone at any moment for any amount of time? Why would anyone spend, like, they wanted to just sell us a bunch of globes. Like, but they also sold us, like, flat maps. Like, why lie about any of this? Like, what is it literally, like, companies that wanted to make globes to sell us globes? Like, I just cannot begin to comprehend or understand who is actually behind this. Like, what's the bottom of this conspiracy? Like, what is it? And also, like, if the earth is flat, doesn't that imply that there's, like, another, like, couldn't people be on the underside? And if there are people on the underside, how come they haven't come over and, like, talk to us? You know? Like, there's so many dumb fucking things. So many easy things to just be like, no, dude, there's no fucking way that the earth is fucking flat. Like, who wins? Who wins this conversation? Like, what? So I just, like, don't. I'm literally like, okay, just fuck off. I admire how creative they are sometimes. Like, the ice wall narrative I found to be extremely creative. That Antarctica is not an island at the bottom. It's actually a wall around the edge. And that's why people don't fall off. And when you go to Antarctica, you're not hitting like an island at the bottom, you're hitting the wall that actually goes all the way around. I was like, that's very creative. Obviously stupid. Like, obviously stupid. But the right kind of stupid. Stupid in a way that I'm like, that's so stupid it becomes clever. Like, very well done. I only eat carbs, McDougall diet, high veg, high carb. Veggies is the key. That's all. Like that, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter what you eat as long as you're eating a lot of vegetables. Then you can basically eat what you like. Dr. Campbell, perfect example of what you're saying. Back to the science, demonstrate multiple times how you, blatant lies. Yeah. I meant about frustrations. I'm watching the French protesting right now. I'm so glad to see. I think I have something on that. Do I have actually anything on the French protests? Because, like, we should be protesting. Like, it's so dumb to me that we don't, like, everyone should be in the streets 100% of the time. Nah, I didn't. I closed it. What should I put up? I'll put this one up. This is gonna kick some stuff up. Like, yeah, right. And this is, yeah. How much more are we going to accept? Like, what's it going to take? Yeah. CR Strifey, good to see you, bud. Cigarettes are an appetite suppressant and increase metabolism. They are good. They are good for you. Thanks, CR Strifey. CR Strifey, man, he's trying to sell us on cigarettes. You know what? You're right, CR Strifey. I'm going to start smoking a pack a day. I have seen people showing how unethical Pfizer are an experiment in Africa, how they got lawsuits, how their CEOs are also the directors of FDA. Yeah, that channel's already up. I'm glad to hear it, bud. Oh, just look at my name in YouTube. It should show up. Fantastic, dude. How often do you update? My critique of anti-vaxxers who say they don't trust corporations is that I don't see most of them calling for vaccine technology to be nationalized or calling for other countries non-corporate. Yeah, there you go. That's a good point, actually, Adam. And I think that's fair. That's probably the next step. But here's the problem is that if you said, like, the anti-government ethos is so built into the mindset of the American boomer that they see, like, government is the problem, right? That they don't want to admit or understand that it's corporate power owning the government, right? That the problem is the government. And so if you say, well, we should nationalize these things, they'll go, oh, so you want to give it to the government? Like, Anemone, absolute pleasure to see you. Big rounders, yeah. Yeah, it's the globe manufacturers. I have an update on the subject, well, once a month. Oh, amazing, Eric. I'm gonna try to tune in on that, because, like, the long COVID experience, I feel like there's nobody talking about it. You know, there's just nobody talking about it. It's certainly not penetrating. Yeah, the globe lobby. Big globe got a stranglehold on the Earth-shaped narrative. Yeah. And those roundies are in the tank dogmatists. Absolutely, man. Like, absolutely. They're just trying to sell you globes. That's all. Think about it. If every kid buys a globe, right? It's like 1 million globes a year. Big globe. Got their finger. Deep. It's just so stupid, dude. But like real talk, like once you understand that there are flat earthers who are convinced of this and they're not going to step off of it, right? It's like if you actually think that Bigfoot is real, you're just not going to step off of it. You know? Like if you think that there are aliens, you're not going to step off of it. Like you think that and that's what you think. And the flat earth one is just so obviously falsifiable. Like Bigfoot and aliens are not falsifiable. Like it might be. There might be a creature living in the American forests are huge. Like they are. It is actually possible that there are creatures like Bigfoot living in the forests of America, right? They're huge. And not only that, there's also kind of a similar story that actually happened in China, where people were like, yeah, I found these pandas. I found these bear things, and they look like this, and they have this kind of thing. And everyone was like, fuck you, fake news. What a fake story, fairy tale creature, right? And now we all know pandas are real. Like, we have them in zoos and shit. Like, there's a panda, right? But there was a period of time where people were like, nah, these aren't real. So it's like a Bigfoot narrative that happened to the panda. And so it's completely possible that one day a guy will just be like walking through the forest and he'll turn and there it'll be. And he'll be like, oh shit. And he'll like pull out a video camera and be like, there you go. And it won't be like a fuzzy image. It'll be straight up like Harry and the Hendersons. Like he's just like fucking completely videotaping and he's like, guys, you will not even. And he like fucking will record them and like, it's totally possible that this happens. So there's no way to falsify it. Right? Same story with aliens. Like, maybe. Like, sure. I don't see why it couldn't be possible that they're out there, right? And it makes complete sense to me why they wouldn't talk to us, because we're train wreck, right? So, yeah, like, you can't falsify it. The flat Earth narrative, you can falsify that in 2 seconds. Like, I'm from rural Manitoba, and Manitoba is known for being flat, and it's so flat that you can see the curvature of the Earth. Like, you can see it. You like literally turn your head like that, and you see the curvature of the Earth. And like, we have recordings of like ships, and they go like that because of the curvature of the Earth. The Egyptians had to account for the curvature of the Earth because of the pyramids. We have literally sent people into space, and they've taken a picture of the Earth, and guess what? It's round. We've got satellites that rely on the orbit of the Earth. Like, we've shot people at the moon. We've brought people back from the moon. Like, there's so many easy ways to falsify this, and still they persist. And so that has convinced me that ethos, that mindset, good to see you, Tinker, that mindset of flat eartherism exists in other discourses. And I think one of the most persistent ones is that it exists for sure within the mindset of the capitalist class. That they are essentially of the same ethos as flat earthers, where it doesn't matter what you show them. Evidence is irrelevant. History is irrelevant. Facts are irrelevant. They're essentially a flat earther. Like someone like Peterson. I think Peterson is like a flat earther. Like it just doesn't matter what you show him. He'll always talk the way he talks and just dismiss. Oh, those are the postmodernists trying to convince you and con you into the destruction of Western civilization. I don't think it's like a religion. I think it is a religion. I call it a death cult. Right? Like, it is a religion. It's not like a religion. Pittsburgh Dude 87, good to see you. The moon landing was falsifiable too? My take on the moon landing conspiracy is that I actually do think they faked the footage. I think that they went to the moon. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and those guys were on the moon. For sure. I don't think that you can fight that. That, like, we saw them launch the rocket with our eyes. The rocket went up. Right? We've got all this information. They left shit on the moon that you can see. You can literally, like, pull up a big telescope and be like, and who would be the first people to be like, no, they did not go to the moon? Would be the Russians. Like, the Russians would be like, no, you didn't. You fucking faked the whole thing. But there's something about the type of film that they used to capture the footage that couldn't have survived the journey. I don't exactly remember, but that's the moment where I went, oh, okay. Like, so the footage couldn't have been taken because footage couldn't have survived the trip. And so I'm of the opinion, yeah, conspiracy theorists think Stanley Kubrick filmed it in a studio. Yeah. And I have to tell you, I think that this is true. I think that they did the whole journey and they got to the moon and all of that, and that's completely accurate. And then they also did this fake footage to show you and to kind of create the impact of them doing it. And so I think that the whole thing could have been resolved if they just had to put in the corner reenactment. If they just had a little picture that just like reenactment, I think everybody would have gone like, oh, that's it's kind of sweet in a way. It's kind of nice. They're like, oh, they did like a fake version of it. They like did a dramatization of them going to the moon. And that's thoughtful of them. Like, I think that's no. And again, to restate my point, the moon landing is real. They definitely went. They were on the moon. The whole thing happened for sure, 100%. And I bet it happened close to the way that it happened on the footage. But I think the footage is fake. I think they did a reenactment of the footage and then showed it to us to be like, look, this is the thing that we did. And all that they would have to have done in order to resolve this entire conversation is just put in the bottom right hand or like somewhere on the screen, just reenactment. Just the word reenactment. And everybody would have been like, oh, okay. I don't think it would have been a controversy. I don't think it would have been a big deal. I don't think anybody would have, like, maybe some conservative asshole somewhere would have been like, they could have brought up a camera and taken, they don't need to do a reenactment or anything. Like, but, you know, and at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, I think it's completely believable. I think it's completely believable that they would be like, we want this to be a big cultural iconic moment. We want people to like, and they have the president of the United States talking about it. They had the attention of the nation. Everybody was sitting in front of TV screens watching the rocket go up into space and all this kind of stuff. And it's just, to me, it's like a no-brainer that they would just be like, okay, we're doing this, but we really want the big hit. We really want the impact. Well, how do you do that? Show them footage from men on the moon. Show them the footage. That when they come back, we'll put it everywhere. And look, this is them on the moon, and we'll capture the attention of people and really inspire people to think about space and think about exploration and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, so fake it. Why not? Like, just why fucking not? And I gotta be honest with you, I'm completely fine with it. If that's what it turns out to be, that it's like, yeah, we faked the footage, I'm gonna be like, fucking, you should have just said so. I think everybody would be like, oh, they faked the footage. It's fine. I think it's completely fine. I don't know why. Like, it's like the only explanation to me is like early days of film and television. That like, no, we had to say it was real or else people would have stopped believing. And I'm like, they wouldn't have stopped believing. They wouldn't have thought it was shit. I think that if you had to just put the word reenactment, everybody just would have been like, oh yeah, that's nice of them. That's what I think people would have done. They would have been like, oh yeah, I bet it's close to that. You know? So I think they wanted it to be a big cultural iconic moment. They knew what they were doing in terms of they knew that they were in this space race with Russia. They knew that they wanted this to be important. And they wanted to prove that America was great and that we could defeat the Russians and all this kind of stuff. And so they faked the footage. And that's fine. I don't think it's like I don't think it's at all sinister at all. Like even a little. In a kind of a way I actually think it's kind of sweet. I think it's sort of sweet that they're like, we can't get the footage, but we're gonna get the footage. You know? I think it's nice. Yeah, the Soviets though, said they detected the moon landing. It happened, of course. No, of course it happened. Like, if it didn't happen, the Soviets themselves would have been like, no, that didn't happen. Like, they were paying attention. Like the Soviets were deeply invested in space exploration, right? They were deeply invested in that. They were the first people to hit the moon with an object. They were the first people to into space. Like the Soviets were doing space exploration. Like the reason why the Americans were like, this has to be such a big fucking deal is because of how successful the communists had been in space exploration, right? And yeah, I think that's what happened. Again, it is like, it's a conspiracy theory, but it's like the mildest possible version of a conspiracy theory where like the outcome doesn't actually matter. Like it doesn't actually matter if the footage was fake. You know? Like if it's the real footage, then I'm like, oh, okay. And if it's the fake footage, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I don't care either way. Like my opinion doesn't change even a little. I think it's interesting. That's really all. Yeah. The best evidence of the moon landing being faked is Stanley Kubrick's insistence on filming on location. Yeah, I mean, I think that the deal that Kubrick made was, I will fake this footage for you, but you will let me do anything I want in terms of film. Like I can tell any story I want now, and I think that they agreed to that. If you're dedicated to flat Earth, you aren't talking about capitalism. Ruling class wins that one for sure. Yeah, that's true, Grinning. Yeah. It's like the JFK assassination. Not to kick the hornet's nest, but it's like you're just. My Kubrick comment was a joke. Nah, I think that Stanley Kubrick faked the. I think that's fine. Like he like why like he was the guy that was most invested in that type of filming in the first place, right? And I genuinely think that this is true. I think that Stanley Kubrick faked the footage, and the deal that he cut was, I will do this for you, but you will let me make whatever movie I want, and you can't say no. And I think that they upheld that until Eyes Wide Shut. Because Eyes Wide Shut, they actually cut 30 minutes out of it after he died. Like he made Eyes Wide Shut, and they refused to release it unless he cut these 30 minutes, and then he died, and they released it with the 30 minutes cut. So I think that I'm very curious what they cut out of Eyes Wide Shut, first of all. Well, Eyes Wide Shut is a good Kubrick film because Kubrick was obviously trying to point out, he was ahead of the curve in regards to like how detached and psychopathic the billionaire class actually is. And I really think that the shit that he cut, that got cut out of that film, was was shit to, yeah, Epstein scandal in a palace. Yeah. That's what I think got cut out. I think that he was trying to expose that and really show that, like, oh, this is a pedophile ring. Like, the billionaire class has come together and is exploiting and using their power and wealth to create this evil place. And he knows about it because he's in that kind of ring. And so on his way out the door, I think he wanted to make a film to be like, okay, I'm about to die. They can't do anything to me. Here's Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman in an expose of the Epstein scandal on film. So I'll be very curious if they ever release. I mean, that's the kind of film that'll only get actually released after the revolution, right? Like, it'll never actually happen that way. Con theorists think they found an alien spaceship tech on the moon. That's why Stan Kubrick filmed in a studio. Come on. That's super conspiracy theory. Like, this is the dumbest of ideas. This is how you know these people are fucking psychopaths. Detached, lunatic psychos. They want to mine the moon. You know, the thing that's responsible for the tides. Like, these guys need to be, like, shut down. Like, they need to have their wealth removed. Like, mine the moon? Are you fucking serious? Shut up. That's so stupid. That's such a stupid idea. Do not mine the moon. Don't do that. Like, it'd be like saying, I want to remove my femur to get the calcium. Shut up. That's so stupid. For commies who don't like Kennedy, usually due to a misunderstanding of how they think he was involved with Bay of Pigs, look up his plans for world peace, starting with the joint USSR space mission. This is actually true, that Kennedy wanted to end the Cold War. I think that that's the truth. And I do think that figures like Chomsky tend to downplay that, but I think it is actually the truth. That Kennedy saw the Cold War as pointless. Like, and a bad idea. Like, a really bad idea. That, why not negotiate with these people? Like, why not talk to them? Why not build trade relations? Like, I think that Kennedy wanted to see Russia become integrated into the rules-based order, right? Like, that, the idea of post-Stalin, right? The post-Stalin era where the Russians are trying to get integrated into NATO and into the G7 or 8 or whatever we want to call it, that they're trying to integrate themselves into that system. I think Kennedy saw that, like, yeah, we should be doing that with them. We shouldn't be fighting these guys. We shouldn't be like standing there and being like, we can nuke each other at any moment. Like, we should be trying to create a tighter arrangement and create this kind of thing. Like, and I think that's what the Russians wanted, especially after the Sino-Soviet split, right? Because after the Sino-Soviet split, the Russians are kind of on an island of their own, right? They don't really, they can't turn to China because China's rejected them. And so what are their options, you know? Like, this is something that I think a lot of, especially communist commentators, don't really take that seriously, which is like, most people are making decisions, are choosing between bad choices, right? Like, what are the Russians supposed to have done? That they couldn't turn to the Chinese because there was the split, the Sino-Soviet split that happened with Mao, and so they can't really stand on their own. Like, that all nations require trade. Like, all nations require like, you can't be your own island, not really. And so they start to decide, like, okay, like, we've got to make concessions and we've got to come up with a way to integrate into this. It's like their choice at the time, I think, is to try to hold out the hand and try to say, like, hey, how about instead of you building armies that come and kill us, you know, like the Nazis, right? And others throughout history, how about instead of that, we integrate and become trading partners and work towards a peaceful relationship with one another. And I think that the Russians were very serious about that, even though it did mean they had to move away from communism, right? And they did. They had to absolutely move away from communism. The Europeans and the Americans were never going to accept Russia as a communist country. They were never going to do that. And so I think that you see post-Stalin a pivot away from communism, specifically because of this. That they're like, we have to do this. It's an existential thing for us. And time moves forward, and now Russia, like Mao is gone, Deng is gone even, and it's Xi Jinping now, and the Chinese have changed their tune, and so has America and the West generally. And so now Russia is pivoting back, right? So it's a very fascinating time and a very fascinating moment in history. Also, his insistence that Israel be denied nukes. Yeah, man, putting nukes in Israel, what a dumb idea, dude. Like, what a dumb fucking idea. Straight up. Just like, what happens if Israel gets overwhelmed? Like, and I think that is actually the likely result of all of this, by the way. Like, I think the Americans will eventually abandon Israel, and then Israel will be wiped out. Like, I think that that's likely. Putting nukes there, it just means that you're giving nukes to the caliphate, or you're giving Israel an excuse to use them. It's a lose-lose. Like, eventually America is not going to be able to afford or capable of exerting its pressure through the Middle East. Like, you take a look at what happened to Afghanistan. Well, that's going to happen to Israel. And then the many enemies that Israel has, for the obvious reasons, are going to go in and overwhelm it, like they've tried to do before. Only the next time they try, the Americans are not going to have the capacity to be able to fight. You know? Yeah, Israel's going to try to go out with a bang, yeah. Compare Soviet Union to China. The Soviets helped many who wanted a socialist revolution in their countries, Cuba, Angola. China has the second most number of billionaires and millionaires. Soviets were real deal. I don't think it's really fair to make that comparison, because I think the Chinese took a different path. I think that's really what it comes down to, is that the Chinese sort of bit the bullet and said that for us to grow and continue expanding our wealth and our prosperity and to become a developed country, we've got to open our economy up. That we can't just isolate. Like we will stagnate if we do that. And I mean, the proof's in the pudding, if you ask me. Like, I think that they've done a pretty good job of maintaining a stable, Marxist-focused ruling structure that accepts that we need a period of capitalist growth in order to step off of into a more socialist society and a socialist enterprise. And that's just different than the path that the Soviets took. Like, and the word that I use is just different, because there is no blueprint for how any of this works, right? There's just no... we don't know how to achieve communism. We don't. And so when countries experiment or try things and do stuff, we shouldn't throw our hands up and say, oh, they let the capitalists in, it's over, right? We should be like, okay, like Deng is saying, let some people get rich first. Let's do market reforms. Let's get the capitalists in here to a degree. Right? Let's engage in trade. Let's take their industry, right? Like, let's industrialize using the industry that the capitalists themselves are going to give us, which there is no doubt in my mind that the deindustrialization of America is going to be considered one of the great botches of human history. Like, if literally the only thing that you need to know about how badly neoliberal capitalism has failed America is the deindustrialization of America. The idea that they took their industry and gave it to another country. Like, like I think about like playing a game like Civilization, and like imagine you like build industrial zones and you get your industrial capacity and your productivity up and all that kind of stuff, and then you go through a period where you rip out those industrial zones and give them to another country. That's exactly what we did. It's exactly what we did. And why did we do it? So that 10 guys could get more money. Numbers in a screen. Like, wonk, 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 wonk. It's like straight up Benny Hill shit. And the nation, America, is going to suffer for it in big ways. Like, and they are suffering for it. And like, for nothing. What do we buy? What do we get? We got some billionaires. Oh, okay. What are they doing for us? The material and historical context are always unique, even if Marxism is legitimately applied. Yeah. And that's, to me, I think that's going to be, I consider the moment that I really started to take a look at China and say, oh, okay, like you guys are on the right path, was when I found out that they were saying we are a socialist with Chinese characteristics, and that our path towards communism on Marxist principles is our path, and other nations are going to find their own way. That was really the moment when I was like, okay, they are not fundamentalists. They are not pursuing this concept and this idea of communism in a way that is fundamentalist. They want to experiment. They want to see what works and what doesn't work. They want to be able to have the ability and the capacity to explore many different options, and they want to give their the next generation of Marxists and communists that come up in their society, they want to tell them, don't look at other countries doing stuff with a fundamentalist lens. Every country and every society is going to come to this through their own perspective. So have a historical analysis of what they are doing. And don't insist that we did it this way, so you must do it as well. And I think that that's extremely wise. I think that's extremely wise. And I think that wisdom, the wisdom of that idea really is what convinced me, okay, that these guys are onto something. Like they're and you compare that to what we do here in America, where we're like, you know, love it or leave it. you want to do any adjustment whatsoever, then why don't you just move to another country? You know, just the dumbest shit you've ever heard. Demand better. How you doing, bud? Like, we have a very fundamentalist ethos here in the Western world, and so I think the wiser position is, this is working for us. It might not work for you. I guess we'll have to see if the CCP survives its billionaires. I mean, take a look at Xi Jinping is literally, I think all you have to take a look at is the fact that and you can disagree with this if you like, but the Chinese, like the Communist Party has executed billionaires. Like to me, that's the story. I don't think you need to look at much else to understand. Like, when the 2008 financial collapse happens in America, they get rewarded for it with a huge bailout package, and like one of them has to just retire to a villa somewhere. And it's like literally like, no, here's $1 trillion. Bernie Madoff, you gotta go retire now and be surrounded by fucking prostitutes in a tropical island resort we'll call a prison. Like, that's what happened. Same sort of thing happened in America or in China, right? Same sort of thing happened in China. They told the capitalists to go fuck themselves. Several of them were executed for fraud, and the properties were seized and distributed into the populace. Like, seems to me like there are different reactions going on that convince me that the ruling class is not under the thrall of the billionaire class. Yeah. I mean, China still has over 1,000 billionaires, but it's also got like 1 billion people, right? So it's going to have more, like it by percentage, you know what I mean? And I just think that China is going through the process of creating a more egalitarian society. That I'm seeing more and more articles coming out where you have these capitalists like lamenting, like, oh, it's not, China is turning into, it's not so good for investors and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, because the Chinese are turning on them, which was always the plan, right? The plan was always to allow capital markets in, learn from the capitalists, get the infrastructure, all of that kind of stuff, and then smooth it out. Like recently they went through they banned private schools, and they're creating a more egalitarian education system, because they're acknowledging that private schools are not superior in terms of the education they provide. They just create a class of citizen, right? And so they're eliminating all of that. Is it going through the process by selling weapons to Saudi Arabia to commit genocide in Yemen? Yeah, controversial, without a doubt. The hard reality about Saudi Arabia in the world, and especially in the Middle East, is that China needs Saudi Arabia. That's the hard truth. That China's foreign policy perspective is that it is non-interventionalist and non-judgmental about what happens internally. So it literally doesn't comment on internal crises or internal struggles that other nations are having. It doesn't even put forward an opinion, because its position is non-interventionalist. And the hard reality and the hard truth is they need Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia is going to be their gateway into Africa. And they literally, if the goal is to get into Africa by a land route, they literally don't have an alternative. Like, what's the alternative? So that does mean that they've got to do business with like Machiavellian psychopaths, right? Like the Saudi Arabian, I've said this over and over on this channel, and I'll continue saying it. The Saudi Arabians are evil, Machiavellian psychopaths who are always on the right side of power. They always know how to maneuver themselves and position themselves so they're exactly on the right side at exactly the right moment. They're actually really, really genius. No, but Tinker, what's important is that they have a land route. That's what's important, right? Yes, they're already in Africa, because what they want to do is they want to get ports built along the coasts of Africa and then get rail built throughout Africa, so that, like, they're not going to wait for Saudi Arabia to make the connecting route, which is what Saudi Arabia is doing right now with the city of Neom, right? No. They cannot put a rail route through Israel. Like, maybe they can temporarily get into Israel and do that kind of stuff. But if America says no more of that, then that's over, right? So if you're relying on a land route through Israel, you're essentially setting yourself up to be cut off, right? Like, you cannot trust America. You cannot trust the Americans. The Americans' goal is to destroy China and destroy China's trade in the ocean and in the seas. That's why China is turning to land routes, because it knows that the American strategy is to destroy their sea trade, right? And so they want to shift away from sea trade into land trade. That's what they want to do. And they can't rely on Israel for that, because Israel is essentially a vassal state of America, And if they do rely, like, just take a look at a map, man. Like, the if they rely, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I love talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, man. Like, if they rely on Israel, if they're trying to put a rail through Israel, then Israel shut that border down once the war starts, right? America will start blowing up sea trade, right? As it's his stated goal, and it's how it's overtly stated. It will move forward with China, and that means that this rail is shut down, and they can't get that. It'll be a blockade. They won't be able to get anything in, and Africa will be cut off. They won't be able to get anything by sea, right? Because America will have boats throughout the Indian Ocean. They'll just blow them all up. And they won't be able to get through rail because Israel will shut its border down and just say no Chinese trade through here. So the solution for the Chinese is to get a rail. I believe Neom is here, if I'm not mistaken. No, that's right. Yeah, the reason why the shit is happening in Yemen is because they want the rail here, if I'm not mistaken. Where the hell is Neom going to be? Here, hold on. Let's take a look at this. Because this is actually a pretty... where is Neom's location? Okay, so it's actually north... Okay, good. I'm glad I looked at that. Okay, so it's not Yemen. It's up in here. Yeah, it is up in here. Yeah. So they're building Neom right here. And the whole goal of it is to get the rail, and I think they're going to put it underneath the Gulf of Aqaba. They're going to put the rail underneath the Gulf of Aqaba, and then it's going to come up and connect directly to the Suez Canal. And then from the Suez Canal, it'll go all the way out into Africa. And so the hard reality and the tough pill to swallow is that for the existential future of China's strategy and China's policy of getting into Africa and developing Africa, and turning Africa into a major trading partner, right? Developing Africa and creating a major alliance system in Africa, right? Having Africa as an ally, someone who they will look at China with respect, and these are the people that helped us and enriched and created prosperity throughout Africa. These are our friends, right? Creating friends in Africa. Well, if you're going to do that, you got to deal with Saudi Arabia, and there's no alternative. Like there's no alternative, and I just remembered this is a big reason why Saudi Arabia is destroying the shit out of Yemen, because Saudi Arabia, the Machiavellian fucking geniuses they are, know that if we allow Yemen to exist and be its own country. And stable, then China can deal with Yemen. So we'll just destroy it. And then the Chinese have to deal with us. Like, Saudi Arabia is like Machiavellian geniuses. Like, really, really, like, evil, but very, very smart. And so your criticism of how the Chinese are acting and empowering Saudi Arabia is accurate. But what else can they do? Because the alternative to dealing with Saudi Arabia is to not get into Africa. And that's the hard reality. Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right, Tinker. Like, they spent over $200 billion committing genocide in Yemen, losing to the Houthis, because it's not about winning, right? It's about destabilizing this region, making it inaccessible. Because, like, China could put a rail here, right? Like, why not? Because what matters is this port, is this connecting point underneath the Gulf, right? Like, Saudi Arabia, $200 billion, that is absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing compared to the amount of money that Saudi Arabia, the amount of wealth that Saudi Arabia is going to generate from that port, from that trade route, from that connecting route. Like, if they get 0.001% of everything that comes through there, they are going to have trillions of dollars. Like, they are going to be extremely wealthy. And the reason why, like, you take a look at Neom as a project, right? Like, this is something that nobody is talking about, right? Like, nobody is talking about how Neom, they're like, oh wow, look at this project. It's like this big wall, right? That they're putting up. Well, wow, how interesting. Well, you know why it's a wall? You know why they're creating this big giant wall-like structure that's this enormous thing? Is so that the Americans won't be able to successfully bomb it. They want to put major infrastructure and dig a tunnel underneath the Gulf of Aqaba, and they don't want the Americans to be able to just easily blow it up. And so they're building like a literal shield. Destabilization spreads. The Saudis are idiots. They also find I completely disagree with, like, I'm fine to say that the Saudis are evil. Like, that's fine, but they are not dumb. They are not dumb. They are on the right side of power. You don't think America has bunker busters or cruise missiles? Yeah, if they want to commit that kind of firepower, sure. But like, they're gonna force the Americans to use that kind of firepower, right? Like, don't just let it be like a little dinky rail that you can blow up with a stick of dynamite, right? Like, make them use something significant. And then also they're being geniuses about it because they're creating this to be a civilian population. So if the Americans come in there with bunker busters or cruise missiles, it's like a high level humanitarian crime. Like, it's you're dropping bunker busters and cruise missiles on civilian populations. Like, they are being very smart about this. Like, they're looking at America. They know what America is. They're not fucking around. And yeah, Americans don't kill civilians. Yeah, but they're setting it up to so that it's the worst possible thing for America. Like, they're not just gonna hand it to them. They're not gonna create like a little military target with like a little rail out of it. They're gonna create like the worst case scenario for America should America decide to bomb that. That they are trying to disincentivize it as much as possible. And which isn't to say, like, I agree with you, Tinker. I think the Americans are psychos. Like, they'll do it, but the Saudis aren't going to make it easy. They're not just going to say, like, sure. They're not going to just concede that. And I think that what they're doing is really, 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 really smart. Super, super smart. Evil, but smart. And the position, to just like loop it all back around, the position that the Saudis have put China into is quite literally either do this with us or do not develop in Africa. Be cut off from Africa. Like, the Saudis know what they've got. They know what they've got. Saudi Arabia can easily be destroyed. All their dollars are in American and Euro banks. Not. The Saudis have taken a lot of their wealth and they've made a pivot into solar energy, right? That they are not fucking around in terms of renewable energy. They're not dickering the way that the West does. That they see the writing on the wall and they understand, like, our oil reserves do run out. Like, we need to pivot away. And Saudi Arabia, unlike Americans, understands that, like, that's just paper, baby. Like, if you can't get anything with it, it's not worth anything. And they're taking those resources and they're building stuff up. And they're starting to trade in the Chinese yuan. Because they understand that, like, this is the new power center. Like, the Saudis are not fucking around. Like, they know what's going on. And they are making the moves that they need to make to secure their own existential survival. And let's say that the Americans and the Euros do exactly what you suggest. Okay, well, no more Saudi Arabian oil. That's gone. So you've got an energy crisis instantaneously in America and Europe. Like, instantaneously. Like, literally that month. And Saudi Arabia is just going to start funneling more resources into China. Or Russia even. Like, I think that if America did what you suggest, it would destroy America. That the main victim of that would be America. Like, America is very poorly placed on the world stage, if you ask me. Like they're really their only card that they actually have is their fucking huge military. That's it, and it's not going to be good enough. So what? They can buy oil from Iran. Oh, well-known ally of America, Iran. Okay. Instead, if they dump Israel, oh, so they're just going to dump Israel, pivot over to their like decades-long enemy, Iran. I don't think that that's particularly realistic, bud. Like, I don't think that Iran is in a position or it wants really to be trading. Like, the United States has been doing everything it can to destabilize Iran for a long time. Literally overthrew its government, put in the Shah. The only war that Iran has fought in the last 200 years was when the Americans installed the Shah. The Iranians are not happy about it. And then also, during the period of the destruction of Iraq and Afghanistan, the Iranian people have been putting up with a theocracy because they need a stabilizing element at the helm. And now that things are kind of calming down, the Americans are sort of pulling out of the region. Now the people are starting to move against the theocracy, right? I don't think the Americans can rely on the Iranians and Iranian oil. Like that to me seems like a very risky gambit for the Americans. Like, this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that the Saudis are smart as shit, dude. Like, they've got China and the United States by the balls. That's the thing. Like, they're sitting there. Oh, the Venezuelan oil. Okay. Like, literally, they've been cooing. They've been attempting to coup the Venezuelans, overthrow the Venezuelans. The Americans have had to embarrass themselves on the world stage by stepping down and finally saying, okay, Juan Guaido's not the leader of Venezuela. It's actually Maduro. And Venezuela's not, like, happy with the Americans. And they're starting to trade more openly with China. They recently joined the Belt and Road Initiative, and China's been trading oil with Venezuela. So Venezuela's not if the United States were to alienate Saudi Arabia, Venezuela's going to be like, oh, sweet, I'm your only out. So oil's twice the price. Like, they're not going to watch like, I just feel like what you're suggesting is like a gambit of the highest order that is so risky for America. It'd be so easy for everyone to just turn to America and be like, sure, we'll sell you oil at 3 times the price. Like, I just it's an energy crisis immediately. Yeah, they'll freeze the dollar. Like, okay, so they'll freeze their paper, like their paper money, while the Saudis cut off the oil, and like Saudi Arabia will pivot. America doesn't buy oil from themselves anymore. They through fracking, right? Yeah, the fracking of the United States, the poisoning of the land, and all that kind of stuff has increased the amount of oil, but it's not enough. We know that, like, the reason why they started fracking, the reason why they started producing their own oil. Like, I'm just kind of shocked that you're not taking more seriously the reality of what the United States cutting themselves off from the Saudi Arabian oil market would actually mean. Like, I think it would be devastating. It would really devastate America. And also, I don't think that I haven't seen any signs that the Americans are interested in doing this. Like, what sort of convinced you that the Americans might be interested in doing this even? Like, America wants access to Saudi Arabian oil. And I don't think I've seen anything that's convinced me that they're stopping that. And, like, Saudi Arabia is playing all sides. And I think most people in America, at least, are like, yeah, let's get access to that Saudi oil. And if they get access to their own production through fracking, right, which is a very limited resource, they can't do that forever, especially because it's just getting dirtier and dirtier, more and more expensive to produce. Well, so they need to keep access to as many markets as they can possibly get. And the Americans are doing a real piss poor job of pivoting, right? They're doing a real piss poor job of getting into renewables. They're doing a real piss poor job of getting any kind of like solar, any kind of wind, any of that kind of stuff. They're doing a real piss poor job of it. And I just don't think America is in a position to destabilize. Oh yeah, don't get me. We can have that whole conversation too, Tinker. You're right. Like I generally think that the renewable thing is not. It's not the solution, right? Like I think that it produces energy, sure, and solar especially now is getting to be cheaper than oil, and so that's incentivizing a lot of people. But it requires fossil fuels to make these panels, and these panels don't last forever, right? And so to me the solution is just like stop wasting so much fucking energy. Like shut the American military down. Like shut this dumb shit down. Like we're yeah, but capitalists don't like the profit margins are low. Yeah, well, and that's why America is falling behind, right? Like the capitalists don't want to spend the money, the paper money that definitely is the most important thing. They don't want to spend the money to create the investment in the first place, and then as you say, yeah, the profit margins are low, and so they don't see it as profitable for them specifically. Meanwhile, like places like China and Saudi Arabia are actually diversifying and actually doing this stuff because they are civilizations that understand that paper money isn't what's important in the conversation. Assets are what's important. That the creation of things, the creation of having an object that exists in the world, that's what matters. The financialization aspect of it is just sort of the game that you play in order to get the thing. And if the whole idea is that the Americans are going to double down on this fake game of paper money, they're going to lose. And that seems to be what the Americans are doing. Like the future of America is dim. Like it's dim because its people are dim. Like the ruling class of the United States genuinely believes that this paper we invented matters more than the thing. Matters more than the object. Oh yeah, Bud Tinker, absolutely pleasure. I love talking about this. This is my favorite thing to talk about. Like once you zoom out into global and international politics, things get real cool, And Saudi Arabia is like a linchpin. It is at the dead center of global politics, and the game that it is playing is evil and brilliant. Like they are it's beautiful in a way, grotesque, but like horrifying, but beautiful. Looking to see, I finished Breaking Bad, by the way. Oh, how'd you do? Did you need to recover? I know when I finished Breaking Bad, I had to recover. Spoiler alert: if you've never seen Breaking Bad, I think we're about to break it open a little bit. I'm curious to hear more, because when did you turn against Walter White? That's my question. Everybody turns on him eventually. Nobody finishes Breaking Bad going, he was a hero. Like he is the villain for sure. But when did the turn happen for you? I can tell you when my turn happened. My turn happened when he betrayed Gus. That was my turn. And I think I tended to agree with I tend to agree with the bald white old guy. I can't remember his name, but when he said to Walter White, like, we had a good thing here, like this was going good, and you decided to fuck it up, right? And I was like, yeah, that's right, because the only reason Walter White would do that is because of arrogance and pride, that he needed to be the king, he needed to be at the top. Right? It wasn't enough to be making money. It wasn't enough to be a millionaire. It wasn't enough to have the wealth. and the power. He had to blow that all up at a chance to be the king. And it obviously didn't work out. And so that for me was the moment where it turned, because initially when Walter White's journey begins, he's doing it out of a sense of vengeance for the system that's betrayed him. He's been betrayed by his friends, by his associates, by his culture, his society has betrayed him, and so he's just like, fuck it, why not do this? I have a skill set, and I can make a lot of money doing this. And also you can relate on just a basic human level of like his desperation, right? Like, I am going to die of cancer. I need money, right? But then as the story moves on, well, he's no longer dying of cancer. That resolves itself. So why is he still doing it? Well, there is something to be said for getting a certain amount of wealth. Like, why not have the wealth, right? Why not, right? And we're not necessarily on board. Like, the DEA is presented as a very like a club of assholes, right? Like we're not on board with the DEA 100%, and the people that Walter is working with are like obviously psychos. And like the story really could have ended with him being working with Gus. That Gus seemed to be like a dangerous person, sure, but yeah, there are still some redeemable qualities to Walt even in the end, but yeah, his massive ego is the biggest flaw, and that makes him the harbinger of everyone's troubles. Yeah, for sure. Like he had to do it. He had to be the king, and that's what makes Walter White an interesting character, is that he does have some redeemable qualities. Like he's not completely. He's not like a psycho. Like, he's not a Nazi like the Nazis he ends up working with in the end, right? You gonna lie down, dude? What's going on? And in the end, he does sacrifice himself for Jesse, right? Like that there is he has this sort of sense, and that's persistent throughout the entire story, is that he has this loyalty towards Jesse Pinkman that yeah, he takes out a bunch of Nazis in the end, a big W for me. But that's a bittersweet victory, because it's a problem he created, right? Like he solved that problem, but he created that problem. And it is something that like the entire final season is him dealing with his own problems and dealing with the problems he himself created for himself. And I do think that Breaking Bad goes down in American television history as one of the greats. Like, what a great story. Very powerful. And stands at the dead center of so many major issues that Americans are dealing with. Okay, guys, I'm way over time. 9:37. Holy cow! I want to go to bed. Yeah, I'm just ending now, Vlad. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. Thank you as always, Oddity. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hope you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good to see you, Rusty. Good luck. We're going to need it.